We're joined by the wonderful Russ Williams. We're joined by Jason McGovern. And we're joined by Paul O Keefe on this last word on Spurs. Let's bring in the guests and where we are. There will be a link that may change. Let's bring in the team. Here they are. There you go. Russ Williams, Jason McGovern, Paul O Keefe. I tell you what, guys, I hope my mum is saying this. We've got a bit of an older crew in now. I feel like we're coming to that point in the window where, I hope your mum is saying this, guys, Jim White would normally rotate who they've got, and they've gone with more of the older heads of what they've seen.
You mean we're old and knackered?
Yeah.
Well, we're old and knackered crew.
Listen, we've had to save the best. We've saved the best hamstrings till last. Because if we lose Paul hamstrings, we'll have nothing out there. So before we bring Paul in, Russ, lovely to see you.
Yeah.
You're looking fine. You're smiling. Are you okay?
Well, I am smiling. You're a one-man television gallery, Rick. I mean, Good Morning Britain would have been proud of that.
Well, we tried.
The guests all flipped over. I mean, fantastic. I've got a cracked rib, so there's another injury.
Oh, my God.
I won't be playing golf for some time. But anyway, there you go. It's great to be here.
Great to see you.
Interesting day.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get even more interesting in this next hour and a bit coming your way. Joining me, look, I've got to say, the only time you're going to see Jason McGovern on a transfer show, I can tell you now, is when the effing thing shuts. That's why Jason's here. Jason, how are you? You excited? You happy for it to come to an end?
Oh, I can't wait, mate. 11 o'clock, just shut the bloody thing and get on with the football. Just get on with the games.
There you go. And listen,
I must admit, I've spent most of transfer deadline day on the website of Thai Airways booking flights. So trying to
can't wait to get back out there. We love you very much. We do. And listen, back on last word on Spurs. Can I just say, there's over 15,000 that are watching this show live right now. Unbelievable support for last word on Spurs. We love you very much out there. We're joined by the wonderful, a man that everybody hangs on his every word. No pressure, Paul. We're live right now and you're here and people are expecting some news. And we're going to get into maybe a bit of strategy, what has happened during this window, because people feel they may be pulled from pillar to post. And here we are on deadline day. Lovely to have you here. The wonderful Paul O Keefe. Paul, how are you? You well?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. It's been Jesus, what a day. It's just been mad, like absolutely crazy. I mean, no other club operates like this, do they? Do their fans have to go through this?
Tell us. I mean, Paul, we spoke to you, Paul, before the window had opened. And, we discussed behind the scenes how there's been maybe an erratic nature with regards to what is happening there. It does feel like, with all due respect, that we're seeing a circus to some degree being played out before our eyes here. Is that a fair comment, would you say?
I mean, at the beginning of the window, I think I put out in late December, that they wanted a goalkeeper, they wanted centre-back, they wanted attacking options, i.e. a winger and potentially a centre-forward as well. And for, 30-odd days of the window, that looked like that wasn't going to happen. And now all of a sudden, they've managed to turn it around. But obviously, I mean, you have to sort of give credit that they've actually done it. Okay, fair enough. But then you have to sort of temper that with the fact that we lost every single league game in January. So you sort of, if we could have done business earlier, perhaps it wasn't possible. Who knows? You'll never get the full story. But they really needed to act a lot sooner. They had from the summer where they knew they were short to get prep for this window and get deals over the line. It was it was a touch and go. Everyone was sort of scared that today was going to be a complete disaster and we'd end up, last couple of days with nothing and scratching around and then leaving ourselves short. Obviously, the Radu injury news is really, really disappointing and it's sad for the boy, isn't it? He's going to probably miss best part of 9 months a year, I'd imagine. I don't know for a fact, but I'd imagine he'd be out for quite a while, which is a shame. So effectively, all we've done is sort of swap him for another body with. Excuse me. We
are trying to shut the window quite literally.
Someone don't like me.
Another injury.
Another one gone.
The iPad's pulled a hamstring. It might go again in a second. It's a makeshift studio I've made for you, Ricky.
Bless you. We appreciate it, Paul. Can I just ask you, as we understand, look, where we are right now, just to be clear, I think just going into the final, we're in the final 2 hours of this transfer window. We understand all the emphasis now is being focused on getting Mathys Tel to the football club, which we understand now being reported is a buy option. Mm-hmm. I presume that's what you can confirm, Paul. Do you believe the club are going to still try and bring a defender in this next hour and 50 left? Or do you think that is now going to be very hard to do, Paul, as you understand it?
very, very difficult. Obviously it changes every sort of 5 minutes, and it has been doing that all day. In 1 minute you say something, and a minute later that looks like a lie. So it's really hard to sort of. I had some stuff over the weekend that I didn't go out on, which I should have, and vice versa. I'm glad I didn't on certain things. So it's really hard to tell, but they do seem to be sort of more edging towards not getting someone else in now, I think. But again,
yeah,
with Tottenham, you never know what quite is happening and what's true and what's sort of spinning you a line to sort of push you off the scent. But as far as I understand it, they went for around 8 centre backs during this window.
Right.
So they certainly wanted the centre back position filled, even though early in the window they said, oh, they might not do it, and I think that was just a bit of a blag, to be honest. But yeah, as I was told tonight, as many as eight centre backs were looked at for this particular window, which is pretty crazy. But they've just took a kid for the academy as well, haven't they?
Yeah, they have from I believe Liverpool. They've just signed up somebody from Liverpool's academy. I mean, I just wonder, Russ, coming over to you. Look, we're blessed to have you on the show as someone that again has covered football for such a long time, and your profession as a journalist. What do you make, Russ, of what you've seen today in terms of the attempt to bring players in? Is it a case it's a club that, I mean, I think we'll come on to Jason shortly about the struggles of where you are in the league, trying to convince players to come in as to where we are? Or is it a case where, Russ, it does feel from the outside looking in, I think for many out there, it's been a very much crazy last 12, 24 hours of a lot of incompetence happening where you've gone out to Germany in the last 3-4 days. You've tried to bring Tel to the football club.
Yeah.
They've vowed to bring back the player. They've then got the deal agreed now. Where are you in terms of the business that's been done, Russ, for you this window, or the business that's trying to be done, I must say, before the deadline here?
Well, I mean, for me, it's exactly the same nearly every window, with probably one exception a couple of years ago. I mean, it's lastminute.com, isn't it? And this is the way the chairman operates. But I think Tel is a great signing. And Danso, of course, a very useful body. We know that. Kinski, we've seen what he is capable of already. Really good addition to the squad. So obviously, I hope they're going to do very well. Are we going to bring anybody else in? I mean, I think Paul touched on it there. 8 centre-backs we could have asked to come and play for us. And there is an issue, isn't there? There's an issue with the board and the owners. There's an issue with the wages, which are very low compared to all other Premier League clubs who are trying to win things. There's a question of the form. Players are not stupid. They look at the games coming up and they say, okay, Carabao Cup semi-final, chances are won't get to Wembley. I hope we do, obviously. We all do. FA Cup, away at Villa, difficult game. Premier League form is very bad. Europa League, we've been scraping along a little bit. And so players, I think, look at that as well. And then there's the coach. I mean, I don't know what you think, Paul. Is Anja Paul?
Definitely.
For players?
Well, he was today, yeah.
Yeah. But apart from that one thing, is he a coach that players, as far as you know,
well, if you look
got to play for Ange?
If you look at this particular season and Spurs' form and the way they've been, and it's been, I know he's been obviously literally hamstrung, but if you look at the board's patience with him this season, it appears anyway so far, they wouldn't have done that for any other manager. They haven't done. History shows you they haven't done that for any other manager. Would probably be a better way of saying it. And also, when you look at those lads out on the Saturday or the Sunday, they're playing for him. They're buying into him. So there is something there, and it's just whether they can get through the turbulent waters in between, survive it, build a different sort of philosophy at the club. And if these players do go through the rough with him, they're gonna want to enjoy the better moments. They won't want to stick around. If you stick around now, you're sticking around for a long time, aren't you? Mm-hmm. So I think perhaps when you get a more high-profile manager, I don't know whether you sort of in the back of your mind believe, is he going to be here for long? If something comes better, he'll be gone anyway. So I don't have to worry, because in a year's time, if I'm not playing, he'll be gone anyway. So it does seem that for once they have sort of stuck to their guns with the manager and sort of put up with a lot. I mean, we're 15th in the league, or we're 15th in the league. I mean, Daniel Levy doesn't tolerate that sort of stuff normally. Whether that's also a combination of there's stuff going on in the boardroom between him and Enoch, and maybe the stars are aligned for Ange so that he's bought a bit more time. But if you step back and think about it, they brought in Scott Munn as head of operations, and Scott Munn employed Ange Postecoglou. So it's his appointment. If you then sack him after 18 months, what do you do with Scott Munn? Because you brought him in to build up this new setup in the whole football. You haven't given him time to get his structure in place, if you like. He brings in Johan, he brings in Ange Postecoglou, obviously, first. So do you then rip all that up again? Or do you finally say, do you know what, we're going to have to go through this, take it on the chin and stick with him? And then we can actually justifiably say, look, we went through this journey and we stuck to it, and we did exactly what we'd promised from the off. Because obviously they went for their win now managers, paying them £15 million a season, and it just didn't work. The dynamics didn't work. Those managers aren't committed to the club. They don't give a shit about Tottenham because they'll just move on. Whereas I think, whatever people say about Ange's record, that's the biggest gig he'll ever get. So does he buy in? Does he buy into the club more? I mean, he's not once had a real dig at the board. He said, we're in this together. Look, at the end of the day, I face the consequences. So maybe, just maybe, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet for once, which obviously would be a change for Tottenham.
But I do think, as far as players go, though, Rick, just to finish up answering your question, players want trophies. We don't look as though we're going to win trophies, sadly, at the moment. Please God, it changes.
Not now.
Not right now, but they look at past history and they look at wages. So they look at, are they going to be successful, and are they going to be paid a ridiculous amount of money?
Yeah.
And Tottenham are not in that ball game at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that basically Spurs potential players have to accept, or Spurs themselves have to accept, they're perhaps fishing in a different bowl now. Now we can argue they shouldn't be, because they've got the revenues to shop elsewhere, but they've chosen this path obviously deliberately for economic and other reasons, probably primarily economic, as we know. But once you're in that bowl, then perhaps your targets are different anyway. You're not going to go out and target a centre forward who's on £350,000 a week, because then if you did that one deal, you've got 24 players who are on not even half that. So all of a sudden you've got an issue there anyway. So I think we as fans just have to accept that this is the road, the path they've taken. Yeah, we don't have to agree with it, but that's the way. That's what they've chose to do, and that's the way they want to run the business. And unfortunately, you sort of have to suck it up. But until Enoch leaves the club, I think that's going to be their mantra. I don't believe that they will change that.
I think on that point there, I mean, Jason's bringing you in. You've been quite consistent a lot of the window about the situations that Spurs may face when it comes down to the registration of players. I think that's been your biggest bugbear, that when you've seen, the likes of 5 or 6, 7 or 8 players being linked, you've taken the approach, well, it's all very well you wanting 4, 5 or 6 players coming in, but how are you actually going to register those players? And I think that's why you've always been one that's been always, when it comes to transfer windows, fairly calm, because you are acutely aware if the club want to bring in players, they're going to have to then make decisions about how they're going to manage the necessary squad spots to do that. Is that why, probably I would imagine, you're fairly calm looking at what Spurs are trying to do today, even though there's probably many around there that are losing their minds by how erratic it has been? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think some of it. I mean, for me, I don't get caught up in the hype of trying to do deals early, because I believe that if we're going to bring in the real quality that we need, then that quality comes to us much later in transfer windows. And I think you've seen that even with Tel over the weekend. I mean, Mathys Tel hasn't necessarily got the numbers to back his quality up yet, but I think most people that have seen him play will say, no, this is a top quality player that you look at and feel like he could be a first team player. Whereas perhaps I look at Danso and think if Romero and Mickey are fit, he's the backup option. So I think backup options you can maybe sign earlier in the window. But I think for real quality, you have to wait till late. And just to kind of put some perspective on it, there's lots of criticisms of how we're scrambling around today. Aston Villa have had a brilliant window. They hadn't signed a single player until this morning. They've signed 3 today. You know, so and Marcus Rashford, a bit like us and what I'm saying with Tel, Marcus Rashford, he hasn't wanted to go to Aston Villa until the last minute. If Aston Villa had made that proposal to him on January the 5th, Marcus Rashford wouldn't have been at Aston Villa on January the 6th. So I think if you want that quality profile player and you're a Tottenham or an Aston Villa or a Newcastle or a clubs like that, you have to wait, because it's not surprising the big boys want to go to the big clubs. And I don't think our league position has hindered us that much in the window, because I think most players would look at it and see that Tottenham are in Europe pretty much every single year. They've not been in the bottom 5 or 6. You know, they're not like Everton that are perennially struggling relegation. And I think most people would look at it and use the context. Look, they've had so many injuries, it's not surprising they're struggling. I don't think it would put somebody off that he thinks they're 15th, because I think they would just look at it and think they won't be 15th next year. And if they are, they'd have sacked the manager and they'll have a new one in, and then they won't be 15th anyway, type of thing. So I don't think the league position's been a problem to us. But I think for Spurs to get real quality, you have to wait. And I mean, you know, you look at some of the other clubs, Liverpool are possibly losing 3 players in the summer, done nothing. Arsenal fans have been screaming for a striker all window. They're going to go through nothing. Manchester United have waited until today to sign a player. You know, I think that's just the nature of the January window. The only ones that have got players in are Manchester City, and even Manchester City's, let's be fair, Manchester City is still looking to do business today. So I think that's partly the nature of the window. I don't think it's always of Tottenham's doing. Mathys Tel is a great example. Didn't want to move until about January the 25th. Was talking about staying at Bayern. So there's parts of that as well. You had European competitions going on until last week. So some teams that weren't sure of a top 8 position or sure of a qualification position, they didn't want to sell players while things like that were going on. So, you know, I'm not surprised it's gone this late. I think, you know, Fabrizio Romano loves to pump it up, but, you know, the transfer window's not for Fabrizio Romano. It's for sensible clubs to do business in, and that's it.
I think what's interesting, Paul, and look, just to come back off Jason's point there, and where I will agree with Russ is that, you know, we saw Paul, Romero and Van der Ven, they dropped down on December the 8th, you know, in terms of their injuries. 3 days later, they lost Ben Davis. You could argue the club had ample enough time, 3.5 weeks, to be able to plan what they were going to do during this January transfer window. Look, just to be very, very clear, the situation around Radu Dragusin, it's a freak one. They've lost him now for the remainder of the season. Nothing can be helped with that. That's nobody's fault. But there will be a feeling out there for sure that there's been a real... It feels a lack of preparation. And I take Jason's points that maybe for some of the higher profile of players, likes of... We'll bring Paul back. We are bringing Paul back. Every time I think we've lost him to a hamstring. We look at that point, just to be clear. When you look at the squad in general right now, that there will be that feeling that everyone has known what Tottenham need to do. You know, Paul was here before the window had opened and made it clear Tottenham were looking for a goalkeeper. They were looking for a centre-back. They were potentially looking for midfield and attackers. And we laughed and joked at the time, Paul, you were last here saying, what we're looking for is pretty much a team, to be honest with you. I know there wasn't expecting we were going to sign a team, but I think it goes back to the fact that when you are leaving things down to where we are in the window, do you agree with Jason that is due to the fact of the nature of how January plays out? Or do you think there has been a real lack of planning when it comes to the way Tottenham have orchestrated where we are? That did you think we're going to be sitting here on the 3rd of February trying to scramble to get a striker over the line and looking and scrambling for a defender?
Yeah, I think Jason makes good points, to be fair. But I also think it also depends on the circumstances of your own club at the time. And we were absolutely injury ravaged. We were absolutely decimated by injuries anyway. And we were short in the summer. And that's the bit I can't get over. The fact that they went into the season knowing that they were going to face 55, 60 odd games. And they couldn't even fill a Europa League squad, and they couldn't fill, you know, the places. So they were short anyway. And like I say, it's all to do with the fishing bowl, I think, because they're fishing in the market for younger kids, because these younger kids are going to take a lower salary. We know that. So, and like you say, you're not going to get the top players. Like obviously Mark Gahey was someone that they went for. And And that's going to be a really difficult deal to do. And with that one, I do agree that you have to go late because he's got a year left in the summer. So he's going to have a lot of suitors in the summer. So to convince his club to sell, and I believe Crystal Palace would have sold, to be honest, depending on the numbers, obviously, because to risk, say, losing 75 million now and then getting 45 in the summer for 4 or 5 months, I think they'd have muddled through and done the deal. I think the issue was actually the player. And I think for him and his team, it's about, hang on a minute, why should I go Spurs now? I'll have a year left in the summer. I'll have pick of Champions League clubs. So it's that fishing bowl thing, isn't it? But with the younger players, we could have got a centre back in much earlier. They did so with the goalkeeper. You know, they bought that for from the summer. It became a priority. Jason's right. And there's so many different variables involved that you just don't know. And like he says, the player might say, hang on, I'll wait till the end of the window. Something better might come along. You know, and we obviously struggled with Tel to get that deal over the line. Because he was obviously, his camp, I was told early on, he was saying that he would only consider Manchester United. And they made that very clear, that it was going to be Manchester United, or basically nothing. And Spurs come in, done the deal with Bayern. Bayern obviously wanted the cash because for them, 50 million, believe it or not, is actually a record sale. So they would have done the deal there and then. And I think the to-in and throw-in was Manchester United, for whatever reason, they couldn't do the deal. Some people say it was a PSR issue. I don't know what the situation was there. But yes, I still believe we should have acted sooner. And it just sort of fanned the flames for the fans to sort of really go at the club. And you do also have in the back of your mind, you think, hang on a minute, we're reliant on a 19-year-old kid who's out of form, not being consistent, coming in to sort of rescue our season, sort of thing. So you do worry in that sense as well. So, but it looks an exciting signing, and if it had been done in the summer, everyone would be like obviously cock a hoop and building for a season with someone like that. But now, when you look down that side as well, it makes you wonder. Obviously, they spent 30 on Wilson, so they've got Sonny there. They've got Mikey Moore. You've got Werner, who surely gets sent back to Sender in the summer. So I think Tel can play both sides, can't he?
Yeah, we're led to believe that. I mean, like I say, that total there, 398 million under Ange Postecoglou. I mean, it's a lot, isn't it, Paul, in terms of the investment that's been put behind him there. It's a huge amount of money. Yeah, it is. But I mean, when you look at that sort of list, you look at obviously the big one there, like Brennan Johnson, £47.5 million. I mean, you know, that at the moment, the sort of jury's out a little bit on that one. James Maddison, yeah, just James Maddison just screams a Tottenham player, doesn't he? The only issue with James, I think, is that will he perform like consistently, and will he pick up injuries? You know, that's the problem with James. But all in all, there's a nucleus of a really good squad there, but they're just short on a little bit of experience, I think. Yeah, I think that's the general feeling. I mean, Russ, I think the one consistent thing you've actually said since appearing on last one on Spurs, I think that's your only, one of your concerns is the lack of experience in the squad. Would you feel, Russ, that again is maybe an issue where, whilst they're bringing Danso in with Liga experience and Tel's a fairly younger prospect, let's be honest about it, he's one that, you know, got real high hopes. Would that be your reservation, Russ, the fact that we've not sorted out more of an experienced vocal leader in this transfer window, or is it a case that they are also hard to get, Russ?
Obviously they are for Spurs, because and Paul is right, we fish in a different pond, and I think the frustration for the fans is they don't want to be fishing in that pond. They want to be in the big sea, and this is the issue. The manager, the players, and the owners of the football club have got, because we are a very, very big football club. I've always said, Rick, I don't see a leader on the pitch. Last summer, we were talking about it loads of times with all the regular contributors, and we were all pretty much in agreement. 2 or 3 straight into the first team, really experienced players, are really going to help after, you know, we started brilliantly in the first season with Ange. And then from February, it just fell away. And this season, it's just got worse. We know that there are mitigating circumstances. And I'm glad you put up that about Daniel Levy, because, you know, when he spends money, he's a bit like a drunken sailor in a bar. He's just throwing it around everywhere. My issue has always been the recruitment that we've done over the years. We've had quite a few misses for quite a lot of big money. I mean, and Ndombele is the obvious one. I'll throw another couple in that for me are misses. Tottenham is the only football club who can sign 2 Brazilians, Richarlison and Emerson Royale, who are the least talented Brazilians in the Brazilian football sense of the word that you could ever possibly sign. I mean, they're triers, and that's it. And you're not going to win anything with triers.
I think this goes back to that point, isn't it? When we talk about, you know, definitive quality, I think where Spurs find themselves in right now, they're in that pond that you just referred to there. That we would love to be fishing in that bigger pond, but at the moment we unfortunately can't fish there. And I think it goes back to that point where we would love us all to be fishing in that pond, but the problem is at the moment is where we are in terms of the league status and our reflection of where we are in terms of a squad. It feels like it's a project building for the future, where I know, Russ, we want more than that. We want to be more than just building for the future. When we've got that stadium, we've got that training ground.
Rick and guys and everyone watching and listening, for me, it shouldn't have been where we got to the Champions League final. We'd lost. Then big players would go, blimey, Tottenham just got to the Champions League final, got Mauricio Pochettino. They're in London. You know, this is the place to go. I think I could win things, but of course nothing happened. You can't change history, but it is a pattern that the chairman and the owners have repeated over and over again. But you could never throw the criticism at them that they haven't in the last 4 or 5 years spent money, because they have spent big money. The question is, have they spent it wisely? In 1 or 2 cases, absolutely. I agree with Paul that Brennan Johnson, when he was at Forest and I watched him play then, we all did, we thought, wow, what a great young player. But he seems like a frightened player for us for whatever reason. And hopefully he'll get over that, because we've seen in flashes what he can do. But that is the best part of 50 million quid. And in our pond, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there. I mean, just before I bring Paul back in there, Jace, coming over to you. There has been a lot of heavy criticism that's been thrown Johan Lang's way with regards to how Tottenham have operated in this transfer window. You've admittedly there said on this show already, Jace, that there's that issue around the registration. There's that issue around the way we're shopping in terms of the pond that we're in. But let's be honest about it. There seems to be celebrations at Villa when he left the football club, because he was somebody that was kind of renowned for doing more of the players for the future, you know, i.e. the Bergvals, the Greys of this world, rather than being able to really secure the more higher profile players that a la Paratici did with Kulusevski and, of course, with Bentancur. You could argue, again, Conte may have been a big pull for them. They were chasing the top 4. Do you feel, when you're looking at this window, I don't know how you feel about this, Jace, you know, I know your hatred for Chelsea is nowhere near as much for Arsenal. I know you call them Blue Fulham, Jace, but what do you make of what we've seen over the course of the last 24, 48 hours, 72? Look, it hasn't materialised, so it's done us no harm. But when you see those reports out there that we are insisting on dealing for Chelsea with Disasi, and yet it's a player that clearly it doesn't feel like that would benefit us. I mean, what's your feeling on that? You know, I think John in our little WhatsApp group said, you know, we're going to the yellow labels of Chelsea for options. How does that make you feel as a fan when we seem to be going after players that have rejected us? I mean, give me your take as a fan on that, Jace.
No, you know, Disasi. I said I can't wait to see Axel Disastrous and Desperate Denzo as our 2 centre backs. I mean,
let's hope he's not Desperate Denzo. Let's hope he's not
going to Anfield with a pairing like that. No, I mean, like I say, Denzo is a disappointing deal, because I just feel that's one that we could have done earlier in the window. I mean, and then you're hijacking a deal that Wolves have agreed. So, you know, we feel like we should be above deals like that, and yet we can't get deals over the line if they're looking at elite clubs. It's just a balancing act, isn't it? We should have got business done earlier for sure, but you know, just I try and take the Tottenham hat off it. I mean, you know, Brighton's recruitment is constantly upheld as brilliant recruitment, yet if Spurs go and sign people for 2.5 million from here, 3 million from there, our supporters are going absolute apeshit. Why are we signing cheap options like this? Then we go and sign a Bissouma from Brighton, and that's gone pear-shaped. We go and sign a mid-level player like a Johnson, and then we're arguing that we're overpaying. And I don't think any director of football is ever going to get it right by the Tottenham fan base, that's for sure. But, you know, we'll see what happens in the last couple of hours, won't we, as well? But there's a feeling that we're always undercooked at the end of a window than we were going into it, that's for sure. And I don't know how that's ever going to change for us, with the exception of changes right at the top. I'm not, you know, I don't know Lange well enough. Paratici seemed to pull off some excellent deals, although you know, Paratici also bought Brian Hill for 26 million plus Lamella. And where's Brian Hill now? So, you know, that just shows you not every deal goes right, doesn't it? And wasn't Paratici there when Emerson Royal came in? Is that a Paratici deal?
I believe he was there. I think he was present at the time of him coming in, certainly. I mean,
so not every deal works out. And who brought Aleo Valise to the club? Yeah.
Again, fair point. He was there as part of that. I just wonder, Paul, do you feel, you know, given what we look like, it does feel like there's a lot of reports suggesting that Tottenham are done now after the Mathys Tel deal does go through. How would you think the club would view this window as opposed to fans? I'm really intrigued to ask you that. I mean, there is, as you know, the pressing pressure now on them with regards to this protest that's going to take place ahead of the Manchester United game. You would have thought, I mean, I think logically that would have had like an influence on them thinking, we've got to now step up and we've got to deliver when it comes to backing Ange Postecoglou. Because I think the one thing, this is really key that I say this, is that regardless whether you are for Ange Postecoglou or against Ange Postecoglou, that man has said consistently from before the window is opened, Dominic Solanke needs help. He's made it clear that the squad overall could do with a feel-good factor a lift. I just wonder, you know, I look at our league form in general. I'm not saying we would have won all these games, but I would have backed us that if we had got these players in before definitely the Leicester and Everton games. I do believe, given the fresher options that we would have had, I think Tottenham would have taken points against Leicester. I think it would have taken points against Everton. So there's potentially there, you'd argue, 6 points that we've lost. And I'm not saying those 6 points are going to contribute to us finishing in the Europa League or the Conference League. I think it's difficult to do that this season with our league form. But there will be an argument, Paul, that, as Andrew said consistently, playing with fire in terms of what we've done, we should have and could have done more earlier. And it goes back to the point that, do you feel Ange Postecoglou will be satisfied once this window comes to a close, that he's got a forward, he's got a defender? Do you feel he should have had more and wanted more?
I think every manager will always want more, won't they? But publicly, I'm sure that he'll come out and back the club wholeheartedly. Because, like I say, they seem to have a pact between them. And I suppose also he's thinking about job security. So, I wouldn't take too much notice of what comes out afterwards. They'll say that these are the targets all along, and, you know, only took time because the clubs wouldn't move them, you know, when we wanted them. If we could have done them earlier, we would have. They'll say all of that, I'm pretty certain. I mean, who wouldn't? You wouldn't come out and say, yeah, we fucking made a big deal of it. And the only thing I would say is, how does Johan Lang feel? Because first of all, he goes over to Bayern to try and sort out a deal for the young kid.
Yep.
And seemingly couldn't get it over the line. So they called in the reinforcements of Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy goes over there. He couldn't do it either.
No.
And then it turns out that the manager gives him a call, and all of a sudden the boy's coming. So I think that's...
Do you really put it down, Paul? Do you feel on this deal then? Do you feel there's more of the influence of Ange Postecoglou on this than Daniel Levy or Johan Langer that has convinced Tel to join the club? Do you believe that?
Well, that seems to be sort of what you know, most contacts and what people are saying within football is that Ange just sort of stood up, rang the kid, and he's managed to explain the process to him, what he expects from him and what he would give him back, and that he's convinced him to come over. Now, whether Bayern have also sort of said to him, look, mate, if you stay here, you're not going to get a game for us, so you should go. It's hard to tell. It's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it, with football and whispers and all the rest of it. It's very difficult to say. But
I think as well, what I don't know from the deal is when the deal was being talked about Friday, it was looking like it was going to be a permanent deal. So I'm not surprised the player didn't fancy going to Tottenham and signing away for 5 years. So if they went to convince him to sign for 5 years, I think I said that on Friday night, Rick, when we did the last show. If I was his agent, I'd be saying, don't sign for 5 years at Tottenham. You must be mad. Whereas maybe there's been a softening of the stance that now Tottenham will say, look, we'll take him on loan, or it can be with an option. Then that changes the mindset as well as the player and the agent, that he thinks, okay, I'll go there, I will get regular football. If I enjoy my time there and it works, I can sign, but I'm not going to be then stuck there for 5 years. So I think, also maybe the arrangements around the deal changed, which I think would help.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
You could get a release clause, though, couldn't you? You could get a release clause in there. But yeah, it is all very strange. I mean, like I said, the word was that he wasn't interested anyway, period.
Right.
And only in going to sort of Manchester United. If Manchester United came in and could make the numbers work, he was prepared to go there. He wasn't interested in other clubs. Obviously, once that sort of dream, or whatever you want to call it, was off, maybe Bayern started to strong arm him and say, look, there's no point staying here. Who knows? But it is a strange one. But again, like you say, the difficulty is for Tottenham, they're in that sort of shopping aisle where he's probably the top of the shelf in that respect, because of the reputation he's got, in that particular aisle. Whereas, so they were sort of, we have to do something, because obviously, can you imagine the meltdown if they didn't do anything today? I mean, and that would be fair to be.
But is there an I'm always intrigued to ask you, Paul, though, but is there that understanding at the club that they understand why fans are frustrated by the lack of business? Because you don't believe they understand it?
No, I agree.
No. This board don't know any other football industry or club other than what they do at Tottenham. So their way, they believe, is the right way every single time, right? They've had 24 years. They've had 16 appointments full-time and interims and God knows what else. So if you don't have that evolving nature of the board and new faces coming in and people with football experience at the very top of it, I'm not talking about Johan Lang and people like that, because those structures you can put in place, but at the end of the day, like it appears at the moment, it looks like Johan has been undermined a little bit, with Levy having to go out and all the rest of it and try and do a deal. So although people will say, oh, well, the chairman will always get involved last minute. I just think that structurally, there's people that, if you have the same, there's like sort of three main protagonists on the board, which is Donna, Matthew and Daniel. And if those people just sit in a room agreeing with themselves at their weekly meetings and agreeing with each other, then you're not going to change that culture in the club, and you're not going to have someone walk through the door and go, actually, you've done that for 24 years and it hasn't worked. What you need to try and do this, you need to change. And I mean that's what it is. And there's with Daniel in particular, it's about power, and it's about just being a total control freak. I believe that's my personal opinion, and I honestly don't think you'll change that as long as ENIC are there, because they have their parameters they want to work with. They're not prepared to go outside those parameters. They've actually lessened the parameters now in terms of wages. They were paying big money previously, obviously with Harry and the likes of Hugo there, all sort of 200k a week plus. And they decided that this is the new blueprint going forward, cut back, bring in a manager who's going to stick with us for 5 years and develop the club, and we're going to get an operations manager, and we're going to get a recruitment guy who's going to be the guru and all the rest of it, and we'll give it 3-4 years and sort of try and keep their powder dry. You can argue that's the wrong path to take, of course you can, and we can disagree with it all we like, but I don't believe that's going to change under ENIC. That's their strategy now. I think they've proved that by sticking with Ange during this tough period, because a few years ago, like I say, Levy would have just bit the bullet and would have fired him. But like I say, it was Scott Munn's appointment. So if you then say to your head of football operations, the guy you brought in, I'm going to sack, I think that then becomes a new issue that you've now created another fire. So if you have And people will be in Daniel's ear saying, no, you've got to stick with the process, stick with this, I would imagine, because he has had 24 years of relative failure in the sense of achievements. You know, I don't count building a stadium as an achievement. I count that as, you know, a path for the necessary course to get the revenues to then put back into the football club and into the team, which at Spurs, like you say, doesn't necessarily. Someone's ringing me. Sorry.
Paul, we'll let you take. We'll let you take that.
No, it's fine. No, I won't take the call. I'll message.
If you need to, it's fine. We can mute you if you need me.
We're
having that's good news.
You want it exclusive, don't you, Rick? That's what you want.
Why not? Why not?
It won't be good news.
It's Daniel Levy.
Jason's thinking,
Paul, have we sold Kulu? Is that what it is?
That Kulusevski song's taken off. We've sold him.
I'm not every thinking about Kulusevski and me. Get rid of him.
Russ, on this point, I mean, look, what's your take at the moment? You know, again, you're a regular face on here on Last One on Spurs. When you're now seeing this growing pressure towards ENIC and the board, and by the fact we hear from Paul there with regards to the kind of where we are with them and their thoughts of the overall window, can you see much changing now, Russ? Do you think there will come a time in the near future? Do you know what? It is probably now time to sell, or do you think because of the amount of money that they're generating off the pitch, and for those that missed it earlier, I've got to say, during the day, before we even were remotely close to signing Tel, the club decided at one point to put out there that they've got Beyonce for 4 days.
Stupid.
I mean, you have to wonder who decided to put that out there.
Club. You're on the the second most important day of the year.
Yep.
And you're telling everybody, I love Beyonce. She just won a Grammy. Fantastic. She's a wonderful woman. You know, this, that, and the other. Millions of people love her. Great. But you wait, surely, till the day after the transfer window and put out a press release that says, well, we got there in the end of the transfer window. You know, Ange Postecoglou quotes, you know, we got Tel, we got Dan. So, you know, Kinski came in early. We did try for Guy, but we're looking at players all the time, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, another superstar's coming to Spurs, Beyonce. We could live with that. But to do it this morning, it just said to me, they're not serious about football, these people. They're serious about money.
I think we know that anyway, don't we? Don't we?
Yeah, but we do.
Paul,
Why
I mean, God, read
and over again?
Tottenham and timing, obviously, are not very good anyway. But again, it's
deadline day, though, Paul. Deadline day. I mean, are you not even surprised? Deadline day.
Nothing
deadline
would surprise me with Tottenham.
No, that's fair comment.
Nothing would surprise me.
Incidentally,
like I've said before, the board are completely, in my opinion, and from experience of what people who've dealt with them have said, are absolutely tone deaf. So they wouldn't be able to hear Beyonce anyway. So I honestly, they had their tunnel vision, and like I said, they believe that we should all be very grateful to ENIC, because without them, Spurs would be nothing in their eyes, and they can't understand the frustrations, and they can't understand the criticism.
Go on,
What would be very interesting is if Johan Lang does an end of window review, because they put out a video last time, didn't they? All pleased as punch. So it'd be quite interesting to see if they put Johan in front of the camera and sort of see what he has to say.
But one thing, Rick, just to go back on what Paul was saying, they're sticking with Ange, and they have stuck with him. And Paul is absolutely right. The old axe would have been out a couple of months ago in the old Daniel Levy, or maybe it's the same one. He's just a little bit more careful. The statistics, if they keep mounting up on Ange, losing games, he's got a bit of a breather with the Hoffenheim game and a really good result at Brentford that I think we were all a bit fearful of. But we won it, and, in a different kind of way. Yep. Once the stats start going again, for example, and I hope I'm wrong, if we lost against Liverpool, if we didn't get through against Aston Villa in the Cup and then lost our next Premier League game, the stats would be so miserable, even they would have to do something. Yeah, I would have thought.
I do think they're at a point now. I've said this before, whilst Jason knows my feelings on Ange, I just think now, I don't understand really, even if he lost the 2 cup games, Russ, do you get any more of an uplift by putting Ryan Mason and Matty Wells in there? I just don't think you do. I think the thing is that what you saw at the Brentford game was a definite adaptation in terms of his tactics. I've actually said he has adapted on a number of occasions. I think the problem with the Everton one is when he adapted against Everton, it was maybe, with all due respect, he had about 24 hours to work on that because he lost Solanke on the eve of the game. He didn't have long enough to work on it. I think the issue that we've got now is that it's the case that what are Spurs going to do if they were to lose those cup games? Well, let's hope they're not going to lose the cup games. We're in a situation now. We're kind of. Listen, I don't think we're going to get relegated. I don't think we're going to get into Europe. So is it a case where you kind of ride this out to the end of the season and you have a bit of evaluation? I think that's probably a decision that Tottenham will have to make. Look, we're going to squeeze in our first break of this show for our listeners on audio. We've got over 25,000 of you watching Last Word on Spurs. Honestly, unbelievable. Thank you so much for all your support for the show. And I'll say this, in the very early days and when me and Jace used to do this show and before that, I think, Jace, me and you would broadcast about an audience of 10. A lot easier for you back then, wasn't it, Jace? Now he's getting stopped at Bangkok airport for pictures and for selfies. He doesn't know what's going on in his life anymore.
I don't know, because in those days we was doing it. In the days we started off, I was having to do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. So actually, this is a lot easier.
It is a lot easier, but he's not used to being stopped in Bangkok airport for pictures and for being.
There is that.
There is that. He'll give you a picture. He'll give you a selfie. You won't be Roy Keane too much, Jace, will you? You give him a picture? You give him a picture?
Do your job. Just do your job.
We're joined by a brilliant broadcaster, journalist Russ Williams on this Last Word on Spurs. We're joined by, he needs no introduction. We're joined by the superb, brilliant Paul O Keefe. Listen, everyone in the Spurs fan base holds in every word that Paul has got there with regards to Tottenham. We'll bring you where we understand the latest on Tottenham in this January transfer window as we are closing in on the final hour. Jay's trying to get celebrating too hard on that point. We understand that Tottenham are closing in on a deal for Mathys Tel. We understand this move for Tottenham does include a buy option. That is the big news coming out of this deal in the last hour or so. Tottenham do have a buy option for Mathys Tel that will see him complete that move to Tottenham until the end of the season. And I think what's also crucial, and Paul might be saying this, I've got to say, Paul's been aggregated all over social media now on the back of what Paul's told us, is that most contacts in football are saying that Ange Postecoglou stood up, rang Mathys Tel and managed to explain the project to him, what he expects, and that has convinced him to come over to Tottenham to complete that deal. That is the breaking news as we enter the final, hour and a bit of this January transfer window. What doesn't look like Spurs are going to do between now and the deadline, unless we hear otherwise. I can tell you, Paul is frantically looking down at his phone at every second, at every glance. It doesn't appear Tottenham are going to bring in the centre-back they were trying to during this January window. What's interesting, Paul told us right at the start, actually, of January, before it actually opened, that Ko Itakura was going to potentially be a backup option for Tottenham. We understand there were reports coming out that Tottenham tried to revisit that earlier on during this afternoon, but apparently Borussia Mönchengladbach, and we'll ask Paul this as well, we understand, didn't want to let him go without a alternative solution to that. There were reports out that Tottenham were looking for a potential move for Burnley defender Maximus Steve. Again, across different social media platforms, this has been denied by certain sources out there. This is a guy that has only been part of a team that's conceded 9 goals in the last 29 championship games. They've kept 20 clean sheets in the process, but it does appear Tottenham are not going to be able to get a deal for a defender over the line. Paul, before I come to you, I was going to say out there, listen, guys, if you can for us, if you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, keep, like I say, supporting this show to a wide range Spurs audience, we'd be greatly appreciated. Paul, I'll ask you that point about the defender. You made it very clear, actually, when you first came on in the summer, how much the club were targeting a defender. They've obviously got one on the line in Kevin Danso. He's come through the door. How disappointing do you feel it will be for Ange Postecoglou on the back of the news for Relo Dragoshin, who is now going to be out for the remainder of the season? They've not got that additional centre-back. How much is that a blow for Ange, do you think?
Yeah, obviously, I think what's probably happened is that they probably got one lined up, and then obviously they lost Radu. So all of a sudden it was shit. We need to try and get another one in as quick as possible, because obviously, from what I understand, Mickey's struggling at the moment. So obviously that's a concern as well. So it seems that in the end they've sort of ballsed it up a little bit with regards to the centre backs. The guy we was talking about just there, they could have approached it. They did approach early in the window on that and sort of check the conditions of it, but I don't know why they didn't sort of press the button on it. And the fact that they've gone in so strong in recent days and actually late last night for the guy at Palace Gay suggests that something possibly, is concerning them. So Kuti as well, for some reason they're saying that he's now a couple of weeks or so, I think, behind schedule. So yeah, it's concerning with the centre backs. It's going to be it could be potentially really tricky if we don't get another one in, which looks like that's going to be the case now, unfortunately.
You don't think, Paul, in this next hour it's unlikely you'd say they'll get someone in now? Unlikely?
Yeah. I think that most deals now will be wrapped. It's about locality as well, isn't it? I mean, yeah, unless they play for Haringey Borough or something, it's going to be pretty difficult to sort of get a centre back in, unless you do the medical, elsewhere and all that sort of stuff. It could happen, obviously, but I mean, we're approaching 10 o'clock, so you suspect that that's not going to be the case now.
Can I ask you, Paul, just stick with you, on Romero, I hope you don't mind me asking this, where do you think we are in regards to Romero's future? Currently injured, he's going into that kind of crucial period of his contract where you'd argue they're going to need to make a decision as to whether they're going to renew the contract, they're going to potentially have to agree a sale. I mean, it does feel, by the fact that at the moment there's been nothing to suggest that there's anything imminent in terms of a new deal being offered, that might be one that could be done in the summer. What's your gut feeling on Romero, where we stand? Do you think Tottenham could lose in this summer? What do you understand to be the case?
I think the club would offer a new deal, because obviously he's a quality footballer, and for Tottenham they don't have enough of those. So you're not going to just let him willingly walk out the door. I think it's a case of how his relationship is with the club more than the club's relationship with him in that sense. But obviously he'll have 2 years left this summer. Is he 27 or 28? Or is he? I'm not sure of his age.
I will qualify that as you're talking, Paul.
So basically, there could be an opportunity of one massive move for him. Whether you say his form sort of justifies that is another, or rather his injury record, in fairness, because when he does play, he's superb. But I think for him, perhaps he's thinking potentially 2 years to go. Do I commit basically the rest of my career to Tottenham if I sign a 5-year deal, which is what he would be doing.
26, I can say 26 Romero.
He's 26,
so he's 26.
Coming to his peak age now. This is a peak time. So this is make or break, you suspect, for him. I think he's seen Harry stay at the club till he was 30 odd, and still now in the search of trophies in his 30s at club level. So yeah, who knows? Opinion, and it's not based on much. It's just opinion. I think that he'll probably agitate to leave this summer.
Right. Okay.
But that's opinion. That's not based on information.
Yeah.
Because I just think the circumstances that he's got to look at it selfishly, as any footballer would. If he gets an opportunity to go to a big Champions League club, and when I say that, I mean PSG or Real Madrid or whoever, and people say, "Oh, Real won't come in for him." Well, they've got a long-standing interest in him, and they were warned off by Daniel last February. So a year ago, they were warned off by Tottenham that they wouldn't entertain a sale. And I just think for him at his age, it's peak. It's a make or break time, isn't it? So it'll come down to him, his decision, I think, rather than the club's. If the club are put in a position by any player where he's got 2 years left and he's indicating that he will not sign a new deal, then do you write off potentially 50 million quid? And do you want that character in your squad if he's refusing to sign? So I think that's potentially a rocky road ahead. But as I say, only opinion. But I do think that he'll probably move on. I just wonder,
isn't it a tricky one, Russ? Isn't it? I mean, I think we all agree that you want players that are 100% fighting for the shirt, fighting for the club. Is that a quandary that you see the club are going to have to deal with this summer? And it backs up Paul's point why maybe during his transfer window, Paul reckons we've looked up to 8 centre-backs during this window.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they put their cards on the table with Mark Guy, albeit late. And Jason, I think, brilliantly explained why a lot of the bigger players happen late in the window. It isn't going to happen with him, obviously. But it may do on another day. Who knows? or he could be off to a Champions League club. That could tell you that at the club they're thinking maybe QT is going to try and force a move to a bigger club. Of course, for Daniel Levy, he'll go, it's terrible, we don't want to leave you to leave, but we'll have a load of money, thank you very much, the usual. And there is one other thing that just popped into my head about QT. He is, out of this current squad of players, the only one who's actually been critical of the owners, and that will not have gone down with the triumvirate.
You say that, Russ. I think I think you're totally right in terms of the fact of how critical he's been actually direct. I think there has been, the likes of Decky and Sonny that are certainly alluding to the fact that I think Decky said this a few weeks ago that if you look at the bigger picture here, it's not necessarily the manager that's saying wider, but I would agree that with regards to Romero, does that help though? But does that also make you think, though, Russ, by the fact he did go public on the board, is that already kind of him showing his cards to some degree that maybe he feels that he isn't going to be here because he has gone so public on them? I mean, how do you come back from that?
Well, who knows with the current board? But if it shows a mindset in top players, I think that even they think about the game a little bit differently to players who are not quite as good as them, because they know where they can actually go and what they can do and what they can achieve. He's a World Cup winner, as we know. So he's got a lot of currency in the game. And if he's lying in bed at night and thinking, well, I just can't see me getting really very successful at Tottenham, I'm 26. Thank you for pointing that out, Rick. Paul is right. And I'm with Paul. I don't know the first thing about what he's going to do, but my gut feeling would be it's going to be a challenge to hold on to him. But probably he's going to be looking at pastures new if he isn't already. But we want to see him back as soon as possible this season. That's for sure.
I just wonder on that point, Jace.
The only thing you can do with him is to get him to sign in the summer, but you put a release clause in the contract that if you're, Tottenham aren't in the Champions League at the end of, say, the second year of that contract, that you're allowed to leave for 70 million quid or whatever it is. You can put clauses into contracts.
But I just wonder, Jace, what message does that send out to someone like Kulusevski, who, to be fair, I think we all can all agree has been probably Tottenham's most consistent player, and dare I say Dominic Solanke, that I just worry there's going to be a certain feeling now going through the club that if you do show yourself to be, and look, I don't think Romero has actually been the most consistent player in the last 12 months. I think when you look at his start to the season, Romero was actually at fault for a number of the Spurs goals early on. But my worry would be, suddenly we've gone from this club that I think John Wenham says on Lily White Rose a lot, that the only players that actually Tottenham have lost in the last kind of how many years that have been players they maybe wanted to keep would have maybe been Kyle Walker and would have been maybe Harry Kane. I mean, those have been the only two players. To be fair, Tottenham have kept the nucleus of their squad. Suddenly, Jace, if you get in a situation where you lose Harry Kane, you lose Christian Romero, you just get this feeling that as certain players that if you either run your contract down or you agitate your way in, it's a way of getting out. And that would worry me in terms of a trend before I ask Paul's opinion on that. Would that worry you as a fan that suddenly that trend could start coming through the squad, if that's the case? And Decky might look at that. Because players are ambitious. They're all ambitious. They all want to win. And if they're not winning here, they're going to want to win elsewhere, Jace. That is a fact. That's football.
Yeah, but where I'd probably disagree with you, I would say that Spurs wanted to keep Bale and Modric too. And we lost those. But, both of those go to Real Madrid, which is the club constantly linked with Christian Romero, isn't it? So I kind of wish Real Madrid had offered me a 2-year contract to go and be a supporter for whatever and get all our season ticket holders out there.
We know you like Real Madrid as a football club. But
finally, a team in white that wins a trophy. Yeah, I can do that for 2 years and then come back at the end of the 2 years.
But I do worry that if that narrative worries you, the fact that suddenly if we do start parting with some of the players that many would argue are some of our better players at the football club, does that trend then seep in that you can get away from Tottenham if you agitate, if you run that contract down? I'm sure that would be a worry, Jace.
Yeah, but I think that the slight difference maybe over the past few years where we've had it is that we were in a Champions League final and we did have a couple of challenges for league titles and we were a Champions League club for 4 or 5 years. But now Tottenham are not seen as the club that they were in that period. When we had that period, we could keep players. Now we're going back to a kind of a mid-table look. Then that opens the door for serious players. They're not going to want to stay in mid-table, are they? But let's be fair. I mean, if by some chance we win the Europa League, then that knock on the door in the chairman's to go and join a Champions. Well, you're at a Champions League club. Suddenly that disappears again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we can control it between now and the end of the season. Let's worry about the end of the season when it arrives. Let's see what kind of place we're in then. We could be sitting with 2 or 3 trophies. Who knows?
I just think on that point, Paul, look, we are obviously waiting for news. I can see Paul is checking that phone for everybody out there. He is checking that phone for us constantly as to what's going on at the moment. We're fairly confident, Paul, at the moment. They're in a situation where we know they've got to get it registered by 11 o'clock, but they don't have to actually announce it by 11, do they? They could announce it after. Is that fair for me to suggest that, Paul?
They can do it when they like, yeah. They're holding off purely because obviously they haven't got anything else, perhaps. So they can whack it out at 11 p.m. or whatever. So they're probably holding it back for that. But
and they've got to design a new font for the signature as well. Things like that to sort out.
The important things.
With him, they might do an interview. To be fair, so it might take a little bit longer,
right?
Because they're going to obviously push this as a major sort of coup. So I'd expect he gets the full bells and whistles, to be honest.
And just to confirm, as we said earlier, your understanding is that Ange Postecoglou has been, I hope you don't mind me saying, it's been much a driving factor behind this deal. Would that suggest, again, we talk about the club pretty much being behind him at the moment. This is, again, another statement of that. The fact that Ange Postecoglou has been instrumental in getting this player over the line. And therefore, just to be clear, and one reason why I've got to ask you this, Paul, is just so kind of fans have a gauge of where things are, that there's no guarantee Tottenham will beat Liverpool. I mean, Jace, I think, said it himself. I think we've only beaten Liverpool 2 out of the last 29 occasions, Jace. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I think Ange has orchestrated a couple of them. And again, just to be very clear, Aston Villa away in the FA Cup, whilst Villa, I don't think, would want to face Tottenham. Again, that is not an easy draw. Do you think, given the fact that how instrumental Ange has been behind this Tel deal, if this next week does not go the way we want it to go, and we hope it will go the way we want it to go, do you think, again, this will be a sign where they will stick by Ange at least until the end of the season and allow things to play out? Because if they're going to bring in this player, Ange has got on the phone to him, they look pretty daft. They were there to part ways with him a week after they brought this player in. Is that a fair point for me to ask you?
Yeah, exactly. Like what we were saying, like they've done all this structural stuff for Ange, and like I said earlier, Levy would have got itchy fingers by now and would have fired someone else. So, I keep sort of reiterating the same points. You got to look at it. They wouldn't have got Ange to ring the boy up today to then have an intent of sacking him after losing 2 cup games. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So he's obviously got some assurances for his own future. Logic would suggest that anyway.
I think the key also, Paul, for a lot of fans out there, I know Russ are going to leave us in 5. I think what will be really intrigued to know is that for a lot of the fans right now, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, there's a feeling that, a lot of fans have been patient for the last 17, 18 years. It feels that the club are working to one kind of project, which is a kind of one for the future. And I think this is, again, where there's this difference of correlation here. Whereas for a lot of fans, they just want to win now. They have got an opportunity, of course, in the Cups. But do you think on that point there, when it comes to the project of Ange Postecoglou, I think what is clear that he's been given a lot of young players. And again, when we're looking to judge a manager over the course of what they've been given in terms of tools to work with, he has got an incredibly young group there that I think has needed, some more mature heads, some more leaders in there. Is there that understanding, Paul, do you think that whilst Ange is working for players for the future, it feels as fans, we just want some of us results for the now? How do you balance the two? How do we balance that, though? How do we balance that?
Well, fans don't, because fans don't have to be rational, do they? It's the club. Well, they don't.
Apart from Jason, the rest of us are irrational. Apart from Jason,
but football's irrational, isn't it? I mean, 1 minute you're up, 1 minute you're down, and then everything's brilliant, and we beat Brentford, and everything's forgiven, and we'll sign this young lad, and everything's forgiven. And then next week, if they get knocked out of the cup, everyone should be sacked and burn the place down. That's just football. We're not paid to be rational and make decisions. That's up for the club, who have this great honour of owning a football club, which is not a business. Despite what people say, football clubs are part of your infrastructure of your local area, part of your tradition of your area, part of your culture in that area. They embody part of what it is to be in Tottenham. So they have a sense of a social responsibility to behave like that. Football has gone in the business direction. Of course it has. How much, you allow your clubs to do that. And I think we are one of the clubs that push it to the extreme in terms of business. As you've seen, we've got go-karts, we've got high fucking skydiving, we've got, all these concerts and all that sort of stuff. So we push it to the extremes as a business, and we really concentrate on that. But they have a responsibility, they have a social responsibility. You can't keep outpricing the local residents or the local kids that are coming through. These people that are growing up. Oh, I don't go to Spurs. I sit and watch fucking TikTok all Saturday afternoon because I can't afford a £70 ticket for a kid, And families are being priced out of that. And football clubs generally, this isn't just about Tottenham either.
Yep.
Football clubs in the elite bracket now do not give a shit about season ticket holders. They don't need them. They don't want them. In fact, they're a burden. In my opinion, they become a burden because they can sell that seat probably 2-3 times over at 2-3 times the cost to people who just want a nice day out, like you would go to the theatre once in a blue moon. These people go to the football end once in a blue moon. And if they can sell that seat for 250 quid instead of 70 quid, so what if the stadium isn't full for the other, the 4 games, which 4 times 70 is 280. So the maths, it equates. They don't want season ticket holders because you're a nuisance and you make a lot of noise, in the sense of you give the board grief and you sort of, push for the club to do the right things. Every single club, given the opportunity, would push for the European Super League because it's about revenues, it's about money, it's about making money out of football. But like I say, it shouldn't be allowed to be treated like any other business because they aren't any other business, So ENIC aren't necessarily alone in what they do, but they do it to an extreme, and they do put sort of the revenues as their main goal rather than the football, which is sad, but overall football is going in that direction anyway for most clubs.
Yeah. I do agree. Look, before we do a bit of a window round up as to where we are, Russ is going to love us and leave us. Russ, look, the reason why I love having you on these kind of shows is that, I'll just be very, very clear. I think as someone that's been in the field of journalism and someone that's been around managers and players, I think I know what can infuriate you is that when you hear after the game some of the press conferences and you feel, why are certain questions not being asked? This is what I think that, as fans, we want to know the answers to the questions out there. I'll let you, Russ, if you've got any other thing you want to ask Paul there to finish on, because like I say, it's been a really fascinating show having you on. Let me hand the mic over to you, Russ, so you can ask Paul anything you want to close on from your perspective.
Well, I mean, the only thing that I would say is, and I unashamedly, I'm in the camp that I want to win something now because I'm fed up waiting, and hopefully nearly everybody watching this is fed up waiting as well from 2008 or whatever it was. But I've got to say, Paul, that the way, particularly in respect of Tottenham and the way that the business is being run, the business side of it, and what you said I thought was absolutely wonderful about the responsibilities that the owners have to the local area and local people with the football club. The way they're going, they are turning us into a little bit of a laughing stock. And, an example was that coverage on Sunday afternoon on Sky that infuriated an awful lot of our fans when Carragher said, for example, I'm not just picking him out, it's just one thing that's come to mind. Oh, I expect Tottenham to get beaten by 2 or 3, they don't know what they're doing. They don't play the right sort of football, and this, that, and the other. And it's a feeling, certainly amongst our rivals, we're also Rans now. That hurts me as a Tottenham fan because I want to see us challenge the big boys, and please God, we're going to have a golden 7 days. But they've got to be aware, haven't they, Paul, that they've got to get their eye back on the football pretty quickly and forget about all the other things they do, or just get out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I say, I mean, I bash the board very regularly, but because the focus isn't the football. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Ultimately, if you, they'll say to you differently, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, is their number one, can anyone say, hand on heart, ENIC's number one priority is winning football trophies?
No, because if they listen, we go back there, don't we? Mourinho,
we can debate it. We can debate all night long. We can stay until 4 a.m. going on about ENIC and all the rest of it, and Tottenham and why they're not successful. Ultimately, the ambition is not to win trophies, is it? And they've proven that in the sense of when we've took the horse to water, they've shit themselves. When Pochettino, when we beat Liverpool at Wembley, and that's quite a famous landmark. People always refer back to that. But when we beat Liverpool at Wembley, look at the two trajectories of the two clubs involved. Now you can say Liverpool had history and they're used to winning. They hadn't won a league title for 30 odd years.
Mm.
So and in that time you've got obviously a freak incident with Leicester winning the league, but the opportunity has been there if there's been ambition shown.
Yep.
The manager would warn them for a long time if you don't get new furniture and all that sort of stuff, And my feeling is that they got so obsessed with the stadium move, like literally obsessed with it. Just everything was about the stadium move, and everything was about the revenues this can generate, and then we can compete, and the reality was, by the time they got into that stadium, the team was falling apart. And that's the reality of it. And they hadn't done anything to protect or bring in the next Harry Kane, to bring in the next Hugo Lloris, to bring in the next Eric Dyer and all that. They just thought, this is great. We're doing well. We're getting to finals of Champions Leagues, way above our expectations. Why do we need to do anything? And obviously they went 18 months without even buying a player. Yeah. And the only club in the history of the Premier League to not buy a player in a summer window. So, ultimately, like I say, we can go backwards and forwards, like a tennis match.
Yeah.
But ultimately, ENIC's number one goal, is it to win trophies? I don't believe it is. And I don't think anyone can actually say, hand on heart, that it is.
Yeah. Listen,
so we have to hope that a manager overperforms, like Pochettino did. We have to hope that youngsters, all of them hit the ground running. And we just hope to enjoy that ride and get some sort of, luck on the way. Because no matter what you say about Spurs not being built to win, they've got themselves into positions where they should have won. Let's be honest, and they could have won. So that's not all on the board. As much as I berate them, they've got themselves into position, whether by luck or whatever fortune, like with the Man City VAR in the Champions League and all that sort of stuff, and getting through that game and beating Ajax with the 3 goals in the second half, and all that sort of stuff. So they've got themselves into positions where they could have won trophies, and we've lost stupid cup games.
We have indeed. Look. Yeah,
but where I'd be a little bit critical, and I disagree with the feeling that they're great at business. I mean, the number one thing that a business should do is protect its revenue.
Great for them.
We all see their constant stream for revenue, but the biggest revenue for that stadium and that football club is through Champions League money. That's the biggest revenue. A Beyonce concert brings in 5 or 6 million, great, but a Champions League brings you in 80 million.
Mm.
And they're seeing, and we can criticise their failure to take Tottenham beyond Champions League to serious winners, but they're now nowhere near a Champions League club.
No.
So their revenue stream, despite all the concerts and all the Formula One and all the skywalks and things like that, their revenue is dropping, and that's not good business. And they're doing nothing to seemingly stop that slide. So there's a big difference between what they're doing. They're seeing their revenue slashed each year.
Yeah. It's interesting. Look, we're going to say love and leave you to Russ. Russ has got a very early start. Russ, we're going to see you for Aston Villa for that crunch FA Cup tie, where, please God, we're talking about a treble on the road.
We'll be celebrating, trust me.
Please God, we're going to see you for then. Russ, you're a superstar. We're going to let Russ go. Russ, we're going to love and let you go. We're going to give everybody an update of where we are.
Paul, good to see you, and everybody else. Thank you for watching and listening.
Bless you. Russ, you're a
Carry
superstar.
on.
See Russ.
Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to 40 minutes to go.
Well, listen, on that point there, as Russ has beautifully teed it up for us there, we're going to let Russ go to bed. Go on, Paul. Go for it.
Sorry, the real GOAT, David Ornstein, has tweeted. So Tottenham Hotspur reached total agreement for Mathys Tel. Deal is for the attacker to come on loan for 55 million euro option to buy on a 6-year contract.
There you go. So just to confirm that news Paul said there, please go on there, Paul. A 6-year contract potentially there on the table for Mathys Tel on a £55 million fee. If, like I say, that all goes through. Paul, again, I'll just let you come back on that. What's your general vibe and take on that, depending on how we've come from the start of the day to get to the end of the day? How would that change your feeling and mood with regards to this window, with regards to how we've got that done?
You start that again. I was distracted by my.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm saying that by the fact that deal now, just to be clear, Spurs have reached total agreement on this with Bayern Munich. So just to be clear, as you said there, Paul, 19-year-old attacker on loan until the summer. Spurs have an option to buy at 55 million euros on a 6-year contract, medical complete, poised to sign shortly. How does that, do you feel in any way, Paul, maybe does that change anything with regards to how this window has panned out, given they've got him over the line and got a 6-year contract, providing things do go to plan? He has a really good second half of the season. Look, he could have iconic status already, because Spurs have got obviously, as we know, a semi-final against Liverpool, a fourth round tie against Aston Villa. Do you think he could be registered in time for either of those fixtures, or do you think it might be tricky to do so, Paul?
No, so I did actually look that up with the EFL, and they say that if a player is eligible to play a Premier League game on the same date as the fixture, so i.e. Thursday, so if he was eligible to play Premier League fixture on this Thursday, then he would be eligible to play in the tie. So that means he's not eligible to play Premier League until he gets a work permit. Right. Now they have elite performance status, so they get it a lot quicker. So provided he gets his work permit, as far as I understand it, I couldn't find any, because someone said, oh yeah, but he's got to be registered 48 hours before it kicks off. But I couldn't find any actual in the rule book that states that, unless they've added it later. But when you go through the...
But I think the rule is that for a Premier League game as such, you usually have to register by the Friday lunchtime. Or
midday, yes.
Before
midday,
the Saturday.
Yes.
So presumably that would mean he's got to be registered by Wednesday lunchtime.
I think that would make more sense. And last time they got the work permit through within 24 hours for another player. So fingers crossed he's available for Thursday, because it appears that we might be short on Thursday, unfortunately. Yeah.
Like I say, I mean, just to be very, very clear, like I say, Spurs look like they've got their forward over the line. It looks like it's a done deal. And I think it'll be interesting to see with regards to how that does pan out now. There is a lot of conversation in regards to the chat here, Paul, me asking you about Mickey van der Ven and where we are with him. There seems to be some rumours starting online that Mickey could be out. I mean, what do you understand to be the case with Mickey? Is there a problem there we should be concerned about with Mickey van der Ven, as far as you understand?
No. So on Saturday, I got told that basically Mickey went to the management and said that he didn't feel right. So obviously, with that sort of injury, you don't, and a player coming back having had that sort of time out, you're cautious. So I think the decision sensibly was made. Let's just leave it. Don't risk him tomorrow, and assess later. Like on Twitter, I'm getting untold messages saying that there's a bigger problem. But as far as I understood it, it was they were investigating it, and they thought it's sensible for him not to be risked on Sunday in case there was an issue. How much, or even if there is an issue, has not been actually fully determined or backed up to me enough that I would be prepared to put my sort of hat on it.
No, listen, we get that. I mean,
I do know he's struggling. Yes,
right.
He is struggling because he struggled on Saturday. So they made the decision, which was obviously, came to light on Sunday, and Ange addressed it to say, look, because he did actually say, having spoken to the player and having spoken to the medical people, we felt it was wise that we would sort of, rest him up and not take any chances. And I think that's still, as I say, unconfirmed sort of messages
and also
flying through.
Yeah, and also I think again, you agree, Paul. You've got to be careful because it's a medical situation on a player, and therefore you can't be speculating with regards to that. But I think what it would tell you, as you've said, Paul, is by the fact they've looked at 8 centre backs during this window, and they've tried to accelerate someone like Disasi on deadline day, where clearly there doesn't appear to be a situation where they can get one over the line now. It goes back to that point as you said that there might be a bit of a more longer concern about Mickey, and one will have to just see how it plays out. Is that fair, Paul? Difficult to know. Only the player knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, it may be a case that, like I say, he did say to them that he didn't feel right at the weekend at training. So that's why they decided on medical advice and on his word that they would not risk him. So that may, whether that's because he came back, obviously played 45 minutes, and naturally his body might have reacted badly to that because he's not played and he's been forced to test it, so he could be sore for a few days, and that's all it might be. We don't know, so until they get sort of either a scan or whatever they require, it's a bit early to say. But all I know is he's struggling. Yes.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, Jace, there has been a lot of talk over the course of this season, especially about the medical staff. I know, again, that you're one that doesn't like to comment too much on this because at the end of the day, we aren't at Hotspur Way. We are not seeing what's going on. But from your experience as a fan, I mean, it is a bit of a unique situation, right, for a second season to be having the amount of injuries that we're having. Do you personally feel this is anything more sinister than, players that have dropped down with injuries that are not used to experiencing the level of intensity of training, or do you feel there is anything further beyond that? Because we've got to be very careful. Again, we're talking about medical situations here of players that, just to be clear, have to be kept private and confidential for the reasons that we know they should be. What's your take on that, Jason? A lot, again, of anger around the fact of how players have dropped down, why they've dropped down, and again, the fact to be very, very clear on this point that, it feels it's an unprecedented situation, with regards to how many players we've had out at all given once. Everyone focuses on the hamstrings, but they haven't all been hamstring injuries. There's been a number of injuries in there. What's your take on it for you, Jace, where you hear a lot of this criticism, narratives around the injuries?
It's very difficult. Every case is an individual case. I mean, you're right. Not all the injuries have been hamstrings or musculars. Everyone criticises the style of play and the style of training. Yet how many people want Iraola to take over, who's got a whole host of hamstrings and muscle injuries at Bournemouth? And they play a high line. So, there's other bits to it as well, isn't there? But Bournemouth are fortunate because they don't play every 3 or 4 days. So they get a couple of recovery days and then they can do a light training session. But Tottenham aren't in the process of being able to do that. And you're also at, I think, the stage now where Tottenham, Angie's pretty much saying, we're not even training properly. So then you're asking players to go out at full intensity when they're not even training. So that's even raises the risk of a damage even more when they're not being pushed through it. And that's exactly why you train at match intensity, to get the body to do it. There was that brilliant interview, wasn't there, with Angie's former sports scientist.
Yes.
And I forget which platform that was on. And I implore anyone to search for that, because it is actually a brilliant interview with the guy. I think he's now at Hibs, isn't he? I think the guy doing it. But and sorry, I haven't got the site that's on. But, he was saying there's nothing that unusual about Tottenham's training that doesn't go through all the Premier League clubs. But, with broken ankles and ACLs and Benson Kerr, with suspensions and then collapsing when he comes back with a head injury. And they've had all of those types of things. We had Jed Spence, your doggy got injured because Jed Spence got sent off at Forest, so didn't play the next game. So, it's not all on the medical staff. And why I'm reluctant at the medical staff is we all think we all watch the football and we all think we have valid opinions on football, but I'm not a medical person. I'm not a doctor.
No.
I get a cut, I go and get a Band-Aid. I mean, I have no idea about medical. So, I'm reluctant to, I remember, Rick, when Vicario went down, you said, shouldn't the medical staff have known that at half time? I said, I don't know what a broken ankle looks like if a bloke don't take his boot off, and the bloke doesn't limp and says, my foot's all right. How do you just look at his boot and say, oh, you got a broken ankle, mate? So there are things like that but obviously there are seriously worries about our medical staff, but those medical problems have been there for, Darren Anderson's a prime case. What does he think of Tottenham's medical staff and Les Ferdinand and Willem Corstens and people like that? So it's nothing new at Tottenham.
Yep. I think again it's interesting.
Just when I see the name Estev being linked today, I actually put him in the group yesterday or today because I have seen Burnley this year. Yep. Estev plays predominantly left-sided. He's not Van der Vaart, Mickey's pace, but he's quicker than Ben Davies. He's one of those. He's pacey. He's not express pace, but he's quick enough. But the one thing, of course, where you can't really judge his Burnley form is Burnley have had 10 0-0s this year. Burnley barely get out there. He defends so deep with 4 midfield players in front of him that barely leave the midfield area and go on a run. That it's very difficult to look at his stats and say Burnley have only conceded 9 and they've had about 15 clean sheets because, Jesus, Sean Dyche might want that type of defender. It's very difficult to compare his Burnley gear with what he would be expected to do at Tottenham. But he is a pacey left-sided defender, and he probably would be the type you'd look at as a backup to Mickey van der Ven, particularly if Ben Davies leaves.
Yeah, I'm conscious, Paul. I can see if you're getting as many messages as we are getting, your phone must be about to blow. I mean, go on, Paul, go for it.
I just got the message fully coys, so there you go.
There you go. So there, just to be very clear,
your boy is done. Your
boy is done. So
they've done media and they're ready to go.
There you go. So the confirmation there from Paul O Keefe, the GOAT on the show. Mathys Tel, a Tottenham player. Come in, Jace. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think somebody's just put that in the comments. Anton McElhone on the Also Spurs show. It is a really good interview. So without wishing to pump somebody else's pod, it's a really good interview to see.
It's a really good insight on that point.
Really good interview to watch, yeah.
On that point.
And watch it with an open mind as well. Yeah. Whether you're Ange in or Ange out, watch it with an open mind and you get a real sense of what it is. Because he worked at Tottenham for a number of years and he's also worked with Ange at Celtic. So it's, there's lots of previous stuff on there as well. It's a fascinating chat.
Before we come back onto that medical situation, just to be clear, as Paul has said there, Mathys Tel is fully coys. He's a Tottenham player. It is done. It does mean for Tottenham, as we've discussed on this show, Spurs have got their man. And just to be very clear on how they've got their man, it does mean for Spurs that he's agreed in principle potentially to a contract 6 years, a 6-year contract. It does mean if that goes all well as a plan, he could be a massive, massive part of Tottenham's future. Paul, I know everybody employed me to ask you this. Is there a bit of the Harry Kane money left there behind that's enabled that to happen? Do you think, Paul?
Well, I think it's just a case of offsetting, isn't it? Obviously, originally when Harry was first sort of touted to Bayern, Daniel was asking for a massive chunk up front. In the end, I'm not sure he got sort of as much as he wanted up front. So I think there's still obviously some sort of money owing there, and that's normal now. 99% of the time, contracts and football transfer fees. The transfer fees are done on sort of agreement terms, so that's normal. In the club accounts, you'll see how much they owe on transfer fees and how much they're due in on transfer fees every year. So it's not unusual. Obviously, rather than having to spend again, that money coming in is sort of offset. So it just makes sense, doesn't it?
Didn't we? We had that, didn't we, with Eunice Kabul when he brought him back from Portsmouth? Didn't they end up paying us to take him back because we wrote off the balance or something, and they still had a little bit to pay or something? We actually signed Kabul with Portsmouth paying us for the transfer.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, look, I think the thing is there'll be a lot of Spurs fans relieved that it is a done deal. We understand that the player is probably undergoing. Obviously, the videos, as Paul touched upon there, there'll be definitely, like I say, the promos that are working on now to get this out there as soon as they possibly can. But it's big news. It is big news. Spurs have got the striker that Ange Postecoglou, you argue, is wanted. And again, just to reiterate what Paul said earlier in this show, Ange Postecoglou personally made that call, stood up to basically speak to him personally, tell the player to convince him the project's at Tottenham. The project's at Tottenham. Tottenham is where you want to be. And just to be clear on that point, we do understand that there was interest in Tel from the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United. Ange Postecoglou has personally driven this deal to be able to bring Tel to the football club, which still, I think, tells you, for many out there that maybe are still doubting whether Ange is right long-term, short-term, the reality is that he's got on the phone, he's convinced the player. And to be fair, Paul, that has been a trend since Ange being here, that he's got on the phone to quite many of players and been able to convince them of this project. I think, is that something you can't overlook or get away from? The fact that he has been quite pivotal in terms of having those conversations, going back to Vicario, if you remember bringing him in, he's been quite influential in getting these players over the line, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, that's what surprised me about the Chelsea boy, because every indication was from everyone, it wasn't just on Twitter, it was, people saying he don't want to go there. So that was quite a surprise in the sense that they visited it and then apparently they revisited. Whether they did or not, obviously, is up for debate. But he's very big on this thing where he gets to talk to players and finds out their true intentions and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, he's openly admitted that, hasn't he? He's said that he likes to find out the man behind the player, sort of thing. So, and then he obviously tells them about his visions and what he wants them to bring to the football club and what he can bring to them. So, yeah, he is very instrumental in that. He's very much hands-on in that respect.
Yeah, I say, in terms of that, you can't argue.
But he would tell you that. He would admit that in interviews anyway. He's made this point several times. It's about looking beyond the football. It's about the character.
Yeah. And again, like I say, I mean, Jason, I'm sure you'll qualify that point as well. Whilst you can probably understand there'll be many that do have their doubts with him, whether it's for or against him, what you can't argue, I think you said this consistently, is that you're still seeing enough from the players to show they're playing for him. And that's, again, why people out there, it'd be hard to make a change when at the moment you've got the full backing of what fills the players. I mean, look, we said on the phone a few weeks ago, I maybe questioned that in the first half against Everton, but I don't think you can question that again in the recent game against Brentford where the players are playing for him, Jason. That'll be your argument, right, for sure, at the moment.
Yeah, and I think Everton, a little bit like I alluded to earlier, when he went to a back three, but you've had no time in training. How can you have a training session to work on these things when you've got 8 fit players, of which 3 are goalkeepers? So, if you're playing with academy boys on that in a training session, this is why the whole thing about he needs to adapt, he needs to do this. It's a lot easier to say that than in practice when you can't have proper training sessions at the moment. How can you possibly work on all these tactics when you just don't have the bodies training? So, it's difficult for him. But certainly Brentford, I mean, the fight we showed at Brentford was immense, wasn't it? I mean, we've all bantered Jamie Carragher, but probably inwardly, most of us probably agreed with him when he did say that I can't see Tottenham conceding less than 2 today, or was it even 3 today, he said. Yeah. So it wasn't... I didn't sit there when he said it and immediately shout at the TV like I do when perhaps Theo Walcott's on there or something like that. I mean, it made sense in what he was saying, but what the boys went through Sunday, they faced 37 crosses, and really, other than the one chance that Visser had, we dealt with it really, really well. And I don't know how much Sunday was. People look at it and say we adapted, but when Richarlison and Sonny weren't holding the ball up in the second half, the ball's going to come back at you quicker. So that kind of pushes you back. So it's not necessarily the fact that you've adapted and said, we'll sit back. The nature of the game was that we physically couldn't get up the pitch that much at that stage. So you kind of get pushed back. So it can be a little bit in between. But no, they fought hard at Brentford. That was a fantastic result. But we'll need to fight even harder on Thursday night.
Yeah, and it comes back to that point, as we said, with regards to where Thursday night does lead in terms of the big game week. How much do you feel, Paul, now, when you're looking at the fixtures, when we're looking at February in general for Tottenham, look at that crucial run ahead we've got there. Liverpool, Villa to come, then Man United, then Ipswich and then Man City. How much do you feel Andrew will be buoyed by the fact that he's got a new defender through the door? Yes, they could have liked another one, of course, with this situation around Mickey van der Ven of a concern. And they've now got Mathys Tel. How much more confident do you feel Ange will be ahead of these fixtures to come?
I think the whole place will get a lift, won't it? Because the players see some new blood coming through the door, and they think they got some help, which they sort of been crying out for. And they've also got some competition. People sort of don't pay enough attention to that. If you got 12 fit players, and there's a good chance that you'd have to be really unlucky to be the one that misses out. So these boys will give a bit of competition, which is good. Obviously, with the upfront situation, it's tricky with Dom out anyway. But in the long term, once they get their players fit, and that obviously is a major concern at the moment. But once you get players back, then you can start building something, can't you? But I think that the whole place will have a lift, and I think Ange will be delighted to have extra bodies through the door.
Yeah, I do agree on that. Like I say, it's been a pivotal, you'd say, last 24, 48 hours in terms of the window. Has it been done at the speed that we all want? Probably no. Has there been some concerns about the way Spurs have acted in the course of the last 24, 48 hours? Yes. The reality is, as we've said, though, they have gone and got over the line as things stand. Mathys Tel being one. They've got Kevin Danso through the door. And I think, Jason, just to come back on to Paul's point there, you alluded to this, how much it does help having new, fresh blood in the changing room. That will lift the mood, as Paul says there, Jace, right? That will definitely lift the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. New voices, new faces. We all know what it's like when, anyone new joins our companies, don't we? It does, there is a buzz about a place or something. So, fingers crossed, everything. Where I'm a little bit disappointed this week. I wish Villa were playing this week as well, because I think we have a great chance at Villa on Sunday. They've got 3 or 4 new signings. So, will team cohesion be that great for Villa? How many of those will actually make their start? Villa have looked a little bit up and down. They were poor at Wolves. They were poor in their previous game in Europe, not the Celtic game, the previous one to that. And even in that Celtic game, they were 2-0 up and threw the 2-goal lead away. So they've not necessarily been the best Villa, if you like, and our record at Villa in recent years isn't too shoddy. It's just a real shame that we'll play a midweek and Villa have got the whole week to rest up and prepare for the game, because I really fancied us at Villa if we weren't going to Anfield, not regardless of the result at Anfield. It's just a shame that we don't get the same rest that Villa will have.
That's absolutely fair point. So what we're going to do...
It's Sunday, isn't it? You put it up there, it's Sunday, isn't it, Villa?
Just to be clear,
it is
Sunday. It is Sunday.
Yeah.
No, it is Sunday. It's not to scare anyone. We have got an extra day. It's Sunday. I think Ange might be looking, watching this, thinking, what, Saturday? What are you doing to me? Definitely Sunday. Definitely Sunday. We know you're watching, Ange. Listen, we're getting her over the line. Look, we're going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. I can tell you we've hit a new record. Sorry, Macca. Sorry, Matty Hayes. I know I missed out on the summer when I was here. The old, guys, I won't put Paul in this bracket. The old duo, me and Jason, who launched this show about 8-9 years ago.
It's Paul who's done it, mate, not me.
Just waffled for 2 hours.
No, I'll make you laugh, though, on this point. Me and Jay started this how many years ago? Sorry, Macca. Sorry, Matty Hayes. We've beaten the record. There's 35,000 people that are watching this show. Jason, get ready for more selfies at Bangkok Airport. You better be nicer.
We were celebrating Davinson Sanchez's debut, weren't we?
I know he was at that first show. God, the Harry Kane goal, wasn't it? Was it Kane's 100th goal at the comment? Was it? It's 100th goal
or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
Unbelievable. Can I just say again?
Do you know how many shows you've done in total, Ricky?
I can tell you. I mean, just
on. Don't you count now?
Well, I can tell you on this alone, on since we've transitioned to YouTube, we have done. I think we've done over. Forgive me for a second. I will find you the number, and I'm going to age now when I tell you how many we have done, because it's quite ridiculous, really. So just alone in terms of the platform itself, we have done a total of 826 on YouTube alone, and then I mean we did audio for like the last 4 years before that. So we're nearly. We must be well into 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 shows, which is ridiculous, really. Wow. I don't know where the time's gone, Jace. We've not lost our head too much, have we? You've been fairly calm.
I had a perm when we started.
Can I just say, 5, 6, 7,000 shows later, where's our bloody trophy? We're due a treble, aren't we? We're due a treble. Look, for all that are listening and watching this show right now live, can I just say, look, it would mean a lot to us out there. If you can please hit like, hit subscribe, please share this to a worldwide Spurs audience. On the back of the news, Tottenham have got Tel. Tell us more. I can tell you more. It's a 6-year contract as things stands. There will be a fee involved of 55 million if Tottenham do take up that option in the summer. Tottenham do have that buy option available there. in what has, I think, transformed deadline day for Spurs. Often in the past, it can be a bit of a damp squid. It can be a situation where you feel that they're not doing enough. I think, again, look, there will be questions asked about what Spurs have and haven't done during this transfer window. But as things stands, unless anything is going to change in terms of how this window has panned out for Tottenham, their window is currently looking at, they've got Anton Kaninski, of course, in. He was through the door very, very early. So there was genuine hope that this was going to be a window where Spurs were once maybe ahead of the curveball. Hasn't really been the case, of course, with that. They got Kevin Danso only a couple of days ago. That was agreed and done. And now Spurs have completed the signing of Mathys Tel until the end of the season with a 55 million buy option in there, a 6-year contract potentially. And it could be a really exciting, you'd hope, future for this young boy when there's a lot expected of him. I mean, Paul, when we look at some of the stats out there, this season hasn't been the greatest for Tel. Only played 8 games, only created 1 chance, no goals and assists, 3 shots on target. You look at the season where I think many would argue this is where he was really having eyes shunned upon him in the 22-23 season, courtesy of Sky there. 12 goals, 6 assists, 73 shots, 9 starts, 51 some appearances. I presume the general feeling will be, Paul, if we can get this guy the game time, we hope he can rediscover this form. Is that fair, Paul?
Well, he's never really had, looking at that, consistent 90 minutes football, has he? He's been sub 51 times since 22-23. So how many games would he have started? That's literally 2 seasons. So that's potentially, 80 games, say 85 games. So he spent more than half on the bench. So I think, we're giving him a platform. It's up to him to deliver. He's a young lad, so you're going to get inconsistencies with young footballers. That's what's happened at Spurs this season. That's why the mix of the squad is slightly unbalanced, because there's too many sort of youngsters that we've had to rely on. And I think that's why you get the inconsistent performances. But I think Spurs are going to give him the platform. I think he's going to start games, and, it was very, very coveted. So, yeah, I think it was probably a case of a bit of confidence, not getting the starts, and hopefully he can sort of kick on once he's got consistent game time with us. I think that's the key, isn't it?
And I think the thing is,
50 appearances as a sub, he still made that. He still made an impact.
I think the key is, I know, Jason, you've maintained this point that you just don't get a player of Tel's quality, Jason, do you at the start of the window. Maybe just expand on that as to why you feel that would be the case, Jason.
I just always feel that players, I think he started at PSG, didn't he? Did he start at PSG? Then he's gone to Bayern. You're talking about, I don't think of PSG as a massive European club yet, because, they haven't done as well in the Champions League, but they're still a high-profile club. Then he's gone to an elite-level club, and Bayern are an elite-level club. There's not too many players want to leave Bayern once they go there, and they certainly have a pull around the German market and things like that, Bayern. So, they're going to look, if he's going to leave that type of club, they're not looking to, with great respect, to a lower level club like Tottenham, or a development club, if you like. Sadly, that's how we're seen in Europe. Our own supporters may not like it, but for players at massive clubs like Juve's on the continent, or Atletico Madrid's, or Barcelona's and that, we are not looked at as a club at that level. So you're looked at as a development club in the way now that even a Dortmund seems to be looked at, and yet Dortmund have got a higher profile than Tottenham. So sometimes you have to accept that as hard as it is, and then those players will think, I'm at this level, I want to stay at this level, I want to compete for trophies now, I want to be a big part in a big club. So, they're not going to look at Tottenham at the moment. And the sad thing for me would be, and I kind of understand if we lose a player to a Chelsea, to a Manchester City or something, but if we start losing players to Aston Villas and Newcastles and things, then we have got problems. And that's with no disrespect to the Villas, because you still got the lure of London as well with Tottenham. But when people will look at a Villa and say they're more likely to win things, and I totally understand why they would look at that at the moment, but that's when we've got to really arrest that slide that we're on at the moment. And the one thing I would say, when Tottenham have at least been in cup finals and a Champions League final and 4 years of the Champions League, Villa are in their first year of Champions League football, but they haven't been to a domestic cup final. When were they last in the semi-final?
Yeah.
Aston Villa.
I mean, this is the point.
So even over the last 5 years, apart from this year, they haven't gone above us, but they look like now they are above us. They mean business, and we perhaps never showed that ambition and things to do that business when we were in Villa's shoes.
I think it goes back to that point, Paul. We discuss a lot with regards to, what Tottenham want to be. I think we've had that conversation already on this show about where we want to be as fans and where the club maybe feel we are going to be in terms of long term. We've actually seen, it's quite an interesting one. Jason, you pointed it out here, that Newcastle, despite having that takeover and that influence of having new ownership, how much they struggled around the PSR route. Yeah. When you are hearing those reports out there, Paul, that, Spurs are kind of in the green where they've, again, I think it was Stefan Borson, forgive me, I think on TalkSport suggested that Tottenham could spend up to 180 million and still be in the green of PSR. Is that something you would be led to believe? Are they actually in that situation, or do you think that's been slightly exaggerated? What's your take on that for you?
They're in a very solid financial position, and I've always maintained that it's not a case of not being able to do it. It's a will. Do you want to do it? And that ultimately they've chosen, as we said earlier about repeating myself, they've chosen this particular framework that they want to go down with parameters, and they're not going to bend from that. And that's their model. That's what they've decided. We don't have to agree with it, but that's their model. So, like I said, but previously we could chat about that all night. But ultimately, Tottenham have their own parameters, and they're going to stick within that. And the reason they're picking up these young talents is if you look at it, is they're probably slightly overpaying on the fee.
Yep.
But they're not on the wage. So over a 6-year deal, for example, for Tel, the difference in buying a 25-year-old for, say, 50 million and the wage he might demand, like a 19-year-old, the 19-year-old is not walking into Tottenham on 6 figures a week. That's not happening.
Yeah.
So that's the way they play it. The fees they amortize them over the length of the contract as money going out of the club for the fee.
Yep.
So they'll palm off 50 million over, say, 5 years at 10 million a year.
Yep.
If you're paying the guy 100 grand a week less, or 150 less than what you would have been paying someone else on a 5-year deal who's more established and more known and proven, then £150,000 a week, £600,000 a month, £7 million a year, times by 5.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point there. It's a fascinating point. And
then also you've got the potential of that guy when he gets to 26 or 24, of selling him on. Now, in it actually, believe it or not, we get labelled as a selling club. Believe it or not, we're not actually. It's one of the things we're actually poor at. But where they've not helped themselves, every time they've got a top player, they've sold. That's where going back to the Lucas and Kyle Walkers and obviously Harry, when they get that elite bracket of player, they've all sold. But they don't, as a general rule, they actually sell quite badly, and they lose money on quite a lot of players.
You've said this actually as well, Jace, haven't you? The fact that when you look at the recruitment overall in certain areas, whilst they've been seen to be, at the past, maybe not sold at the right time. I think we've said it on so many occasions, Jace, you said it, the selling of Danny Rose too late, the selling of Eriksson too late. You go back on so many players that they arguably could have done deals for earlier. I mean, is it a case where, we go back to this point, Jace, they may not want to sell Romero, but if Romero doesn't want to be here, you take the money and you then go with that money and try and put it towards someone. I think where a lot of Spurs fans will be confused is why you wait until deadline day to go and approach someone like Mark Gahey, where there's no way. I mean, I just want to qualify your point here, Paul. I hope you don't mind me saying this, that I think I think you said earlier in the show with someone like Mark Gahey, Palace would be open to selling him. But what chance does that give Palace any chance of replacing him if you go there on the final day of the window? I mean, is that also a problem, or you don't think so? Or what's your take on that?
Unfortunately, it's just one of them things, isn't it? Yeah. If Tottenham had gone back and said, we're going to give you £80 million, for example, it's one of those things, isn't it? If he goes for 40 million in the summer, you're talking about 100%
You think that deal would have been done if the money was right, Paul? 100%. You think the money?
I think if the player had indicated yes, I'll go now,
right,
and Tottenham had gone back in, because no club will take your first offer anyway. They're going to reject it. We don't want to sell. We don't want to sell. We don't want to sell. Of course, we don't want to sell. Best player, captain, blah blah blah. If the player then gets wind and says, well, actually, I want you to do a deal, why would Crystal Palace turn down 75 million when he's got a year left in the summer, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just pure. Ultimately, that they can't afford to risk that, can they?
No.
Because if they get 55 million pound in the summer, yeah, great, but that's 20 million pound, which we talk about 20 million pounds being nothing because it's football, but 20 million pounds is a hell of a lot of money. A hell of a lot of money for 5 months.
I think the feeling, though, he's out there. I mean, Jason, if you agree on this point, that some are suggesting that it was a bit of a smokescreen, really, that with Gay, if you're going to go in on the final day, that reality is we've touched upon there. I mean, whilst Paul says that every club's got their right price, and they probably do have, is it a case, Jason? We've been in so many times, almost like we tried, but we didn't get over the line. What's your vibe on that for you, Jace?
Yeah, it has that feel to it, doesn't it? Unless they did go to Palace 2 or 3 days ago and it's kept quiet, and then it leaks out on the last day because it suits one or two. Either suits Tottenham to be looking, or it suits Palace to say no. Look, we're sticking by our players. So who's very very few times you bid for a player without having spoken to the player first. So when would they have spoken to Mark? I can't believe they phoned him up at 7 o'clock this morning. So I'd be surprised if it was completely just today.
You say that. Did they speak to? I have to get Paul's take on as well. Did they speak to Axel Disasi at all? Because all we've heard is they've kept bidding. He hasn't wanted to come here, but we're still bidding. So did they ever speak to Axel? Did they speak to Axel Disasi, Chase?
Well, fair point. The bit that annoys me when Paul's talking about wages, and he's right. We're the lowest payer of wages in the Premier League, yet we pay our chairman more money than any other chairman. So that's the correlation that you have to look at. If Daniel was a player, he certainly wouldn't be paid what he's paid, would he?
I think it comes back to that point, doesn't it? I mean, this is why, again, people get so frustrated by the window and say invest in the window because of the way this certainly operates. What I'm intrigued to ask you, Paul, is what do you think it's going to take for Mathys Tel to come to the end of that agreement of a loan?
What's it going to take for you to pronounce his name properly?
Well, how do you pronounce it, Jace? Come on.
Is it Mathys?
Is it Mathys? Can't believe. Can I say something? I can't believe Jason McGovern is coming on here on a transfer show telling me how to pronounce player names. We've reached new Dizzy and heights here. Mathys Tel, is it Mathys?
Mathys, isn't it? I think.
Mathys.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a new one. Jason McGovern giving out instructions about player pronunciations. Love it. And Paul, on that point, what would it take for Mathys? What would it take for Mathys Tel, do you think, to come to the end of that loan and think, do you know what? I want 6 more years of this at Tottenham. What do you think it's going to take, in your opinion, to convince him, and vice versa?
Wow. You can't look beyond sort of 6 months, let alone 6 years in football.
6 minutes of it's Tottenham, Paul.
Yeah, I'm going to say, everything changes. Today, anyway, every 5 minutes, everything's changed. I think he's just got players, and he's got 6 months to sort of settle down. He's got to earn his place in the side, and just prove that he's worthy of that option that presumably it's us that can just trigger it. We don't know the exact details yet, but there is an option to buy the lad. So you just got to hope that he proves himself in that time, and that he delivers, and we like what we see, and Tottenham take on that option, which I'm sure they will. But it's not like you're signing Werner, is it?
No, it is not with signing Werner. We hope not anyway. I mean,
so,
Jace,
he'll be sent back in the summer. So,
what do you think, Jace? Honestly, now cards on the table. What do you think it will take to convince Tel that this is the place for him long term? It just feels that there has to probably be a bit of noise, or certainly a lot of noise that goes away with regards to the manager. There probably needs to be a stabilisation in terms of results. There probably needs to be, dare I say, even a cup at the end of this. What do you think it will take to convince that player is worth giving 6 of his, you'd argue, prime years to Tottenham Hotspur? What do you think it will take, Jace?
That he comes to the end of the summer and he genuinely believes that's where he wants to be. It's if Tottenham do win something this year, then that the stick that we get beaten of oh, you don't go to Tottenham and win a trophy is removed, isn't it? That would be a massive stage. And then, particularly if it's Europa and you're in the Champions League, then why wouldn't you then join that project? But he wants to see a club that's going in the right direction, not 15th in the table battling relegation, that's for sure. But I'm confident that I've never believed that we'll get relegated. I still think we'll end up maybe 8th, 9th, 10th type of thing. But we certainly got to start winning games on a regular basis and getting back to the best level we can be for him to think, yep, I do fancy this. And hopefully, supporters will get behind him and the stadium's not a toxic place. But, I can understand why it is like that. But he certainly doesn't want to come to a club where he thinks this is the club in crisis. That's for sure.
No, he doesn't. I think that's why, again, you just have to hope. Look, this guy could play a massive pivotal part in the next week in store. And just to understand again, Paul, I'm really sorry to ask you to maybe repeat what we've said earlier in the show here. We're getting new people joining all the time. Just in terms of that situation now over the course of the week, we've obviously got Liverpool on Thursday. We've got Villa on Sunday. Yeah. I think, again, this comes down to the work permit, doesn't it? The situation around the work permit where they're going to have to hopefully accelerate that, you feel, ahead of Thursday. I mean, is it hard to ask you to put a percentage on it if you were confident he'd be leading the line on Thursday for Tottenham?
Yeah, I think that's likely, and we'd have to be really unlucky, which yeah, exactly, Tottenham. But yeah, I think they'll get that work permit issue off straight to the Home Office as soon as possible. And like I say, they've had it before where in the cases where it's come through the next day. So and then it depends. I think there's a lot more to it than what we're sort of privy to, and they check into backgrounds and all that sort of stuff, of family history and whatever. So I'd expect that to not go through. Sorry, like I said, they get this elite sporting privilege where they can get it through quicker. So hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm sure that we'll get updates on that over the coming 24 hours.
We will, as we obviously await for his signing to come through. And I think on this point, I mean, Jace, for you, I know, again, you're not one that does get carried away by the transfer window. How much more confident do you feel now as a fan approaching those two cup games, the second half of the season, new defender, new forward? Does that change any part of your mindset going into these games coming up now, that we will have those fresh cut of bodies to, hopefully invigorate the place a little bit? It's been such a difficult... Let's be honest about it. I know you despise the amount of noise that's around the club, whether it's the manager, whether that's the players, whether that's everything really. I know for you, you just want to go on a match day and enjoy your Tottenham playing front foot football and reveling in it. I know, again, for you, that Leicester game must have been really, really tough, the same as it was for Ipswich as well. I mean, can you see this having a real impact in the stadium in terms of just giving everybody a lift now? And again, going to Anfield, again, you'll make that point, how tough that will be for this club. That could give us a real lift, you feel?
If we pull off a result on Thursday, it's a huge lift because let's be honest, Bill Nick never went to Anfield and won. And I know people say we don't have to go to Anfield and win, but you don't really see it being a 0-0 or a 1-1 at Anfield, do you? So it will give us a big lift. But I think the Villa game, I really do feel like we can go and get something from that Villa game, which would be a huge lift. And then you've got the high profile then of a Man United game, which is a great game to have the next one in the stadium if you have gone and got a great result. Imagine playing Man United on the back of winning at least one or getting through both those cup ties. It's a whole new feeling going to that Man United stadium. But and then hopefully Tel's then got a week of training leading up to that Man United game, and maybe one or two others start to come back in that week. So I think the next time we go to Tottenham will be a buzz, but it's still going to be a bloody difficult week this week.
Yeah. It's going to be a very difficult week.
Let's be honest, Liverpool have lost, 2 games or 3 games all season. One of them is to us. One of them is to us. And they've gone to high-flying Bournemouth and actually from the moment they took the lead looked comfortable. They are a terrific side at the moment, Liverpool.
Very, very good. Very good. Yeah.
And like I say, I think it's only once in history have they not overturned a 1-goal deficit at Anfield. So, there's a hell of a lot of good. We saw a Barcelona Messi side go there with a 3-0 lead and it not be enough. So, it's a bloody hard task at Anfield at the best of times.
Yeah. I just wonder, Paul, on what we've described as a big golden crunch week for the football club. We know how big these next two games are. How do you see the state of play in terms of keeping these players grounded for these two games? Because I think, I know I've heard a lot of journalists say they maybe have asked that question whether there has been able to be a full focus on what's happened domestically because of these cup games in mind. Do you buy that in any way, Paul, that there would have been an eye off from the players? No, you don't believe that at all?
No, I don't. Football players want to win every single game, trust me. Every single game. Whether it be against their own kid in the park, they want to win every single game. So, I don't believe that's the case. I think in the cups, it's just coincidental that they had better results. I think, like I say, this particular month, January, they were desperately short. Things weren't going for them as well. It was like the world was against them. So a little bit of that. I don't buy into the fact that they're only turning up for a Carabao Cup, with the greatest respect to the Carabao Cup. When you draw Liverpool at home, even as a player, you must be, oh, for fuck's sake. That's the worst draw. But we had to, in my opinion, beat them by a couple at home to sort of really have a really strong chance up there. But you never know. I mean, you just don't know. You need that little bit of luck. That you need that slice of the running of the ball for you, and we don't generally get that. And we've never had that sort of in cup competitions. So we're due one anyway. So you never know.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, for those out there, that transfer window, Jason, you can be happy, has shut. It has closed. It is over. It is done. Like I say, Spurs have got what they were looking for in terms of that forward. Yes, they have unfortunately failed in regards to bringing in an additional defender. They did try hard in the day for Axel Disasi from Chelsea. We understand at one point Spurs had an agreement in place with Chelsea, not an agreement in place with the player. He has now moved to Aston Villa. There were reportedly attempts, as Paul's also told us, for Ko Itakura, one that was on the list of targets. Tottenham didn't get that one over the line. And also we're led to believe there were conflicting interests and information around Maxime Steve, Burnley player. Jason actually saying earlier in the show how much that could have been a beneficial point to bring him in because he is a left-sided player. He's got pace about him. He's in the makeup, you dare I say, of a aspiring Mickey van der Ven. I can't say he is an aspiring Mickey van der Ven. I think, Paul, just again, I'm sorry to make you just again. I know we're getting loads of comments coming through about Van der Ven. You've said this earlier that, just to be clear as to where we are with Van der Ven.
They don't know.
They don't know. We don't know where we are with Van der Ven. And this is the situation.
No, the situation, as far as I understand it, and just to clarify that, because it's all over X, people misquoting what I'm saying. On Saturday, he spoke to the management team and said that he didn't feel quite right. So they took the decision that he wouldn't play the next day. And that on medical advice and speaking to the player, which Ange subsequently said in his quotes on why he's not playing, said that they weren't prepared to take the risk. Now, there's been lots of messages tonight that are unconfirmed saying, oh, it's why it's bad. It's a bad one. But that's not confirmed at all. So it's a wait and see. I'm sure they'll get an update from the club. So when do we play next? I'm losing track now. So we play again on.
We're still Thursday. We're still Thursday. We're still Thursday.
So we get a press
don't move that game any further forward or back at the moment. We're still Thursday.
Do we get a press conference tomorrow or Wednesday? I don't know if they're going to do it 2 days earlier or one. Probably Wednesday, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, like I say, there's rumours flying around that it's not good news, but that's not confirmed.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, all I know is that he didn't feel right and that they were going to investigate that more over the coming days, i.e. after Brentford. So that's today. And I'm not privy to anything that's confirmed that's happened today to sort of say there's a massive problem. It may be that he's just not recovered properly. It may be that it could be anything, couldn't it? So we have to wait for more clarification.
Paul, thank you so much for that. I can tell you.
It's also, Rick, why it's not worth speculating on the injuries because
totally agree.
We saw with the a couple of people saying, as Paul said, Mickey says it doesn't quite feel right. It's only a couple of 10 days before that or a week before that, we had Maddison say that he felt sore, and that ended up being a 3-week injury, didn't it? And you know, James Maddison was criticised heavily by TalkSport and things like almost a character assassination. That he's just pulled out on the game and felt sore and left his team short. There's only 8 people on the bench, but we since find out that feeling sore was actually a 3 or 4 week injury. So this is why you have to be very careful before you chuck accusations at players pulling out that they're not giving their all for the team and things like that. And just why Tottenham are sensible. If Mickey van der Ven came to them and said it doesn't quite feel right, that however important that Brentford game was in people, that you do listen to it. Yeah. And that's why I hate getting into all the medical talk when you don't know the full facts, and we're not medical experts.
No, we're not, and I think it comes back to that point again where, you know, we've suggested this fact that, you know, players' privacy has to remain absolutely key when it comes to, you know, again, strictly confidential records out there. But, you know, and again, at the point, Jason, I know you've been a real advocate of the fact that, you know, there's certain things that can't be publicly displayed.
I mean, I've always been of the feeling that they shouldn't even talk about injury news, because, not being funny, whether supporters know it or not, the player's not going to come back any quicker because Ricky Sachs knows that it's a 4-week injury. It's not going to make the player heal any quicker. And I've always looked at it and thought, why does any team want to tell the opposition a player's not going to play at the weekend, 24 hours beforehand? I just find it bizarre. Any club, I just don't see why any club should give team news out. And I also believe that it is players' privacy, and it should be up to the player to be said, no, look, I've ripped a hamstring. Or if he wants to put that on his Instagram feed, so be it. But I do think of player confidentiality on medical. None of us would want our medical records chucked all over the internet. And I don't see why players' records have to be.
I totally agree. Listen, we're going to go for our final break of the show. I've said it's the final break for the last 15 breaks. We are going for our final break of the show. We've got all of us. We've got it. We are looking to close this show. Before we do, got to say there's over nearly 40,000 of you watching this show live of Last Word on Spurs. Absolutely ridiculous. Grace, get the paps away from the house, will you? Get the paps away from the house.
There's obviously no cricket on tonight then.
Like I say, if you're here for the first time, we ask you to please subscribe to the show. And we're joined by the brilliant Paul O Keefe that joins us. And look, this is the news you've been waiting for, the picture you've been waiting to see. We can tell you Mathys Tel is a Tottenham player. There he has it. There he is.
Perfect.
In the beautiful... Jason always says, I will not talk about a player properly until he's holding the shirt. Jason, he's holding the shirt. He is a Tottenham player. He will be, like I say, with us for, hopefully, if all goes to plan, 6 glorious years or more. Like I say,
number 11? Is he taking the 11?
We're going to confirm he is number 11. He's taking the number 11 shirt. Right. Any players that come to mind, number 11, Jace? You want to give a mention to number 11?
Lamella was that last.
Lamella was 11? 11 was 11. Yeah, Lamella was 11. So, yes, I mean, like I say...
Wasn't Gareth 11 at one point?
Gareth might have been 11 at one point. I think you're right. Gareth would have been 11 at one point. But
Gareth was 11 at one point, wasn't
he? Yeah. Like I say, he looks very happy. Look, very happy to be there. And look, the main thing is, like I say, for all of us, we have got the striker through the door. And I just wonder, again, behind the scenes, Paul, what a day it's been like for you when you started off. I don't know what time you was up, Paul. I don't want to completely kill you off. What feeling would you describe, Paul, getting that forward in for you? Is it relief? Is it joy? I mean, what is it for you? And listen, again, you love the club. You're a fan. And whilst we're blessed that you come on here and you give us so much info behind the scenes, people might forget Paul actually is a fan. I'm not sure he looks like he enjoys. I'm not sure he looks like he enjoys it much being a fan, but he's a fan. So, what's your feeling, Paul, on the fact that he is now a Tottenham player and overall the feeling getting him in the door?
I'm just happy that we've got another body in the building.
God, you sound like Ange, Paul.
Yeah. I just think that it's so hard to judge, isn't it? With it's easy to be saying, "Oh, Ange should do this, Ange should do that," but he's trying to, and like I said earlier, with the structure, he's trying to set in. If he bends from his principle now, they'll say, "Well, he's a weak manager because he give it all about he's going to do this, going to do that, this is how we're going to be," and he's buckled after sort of a few dodgy results. So. There is that element to it. Yes, I think he is stubborn as well, and I think that there's been times. But yesterday, when you looked at us, we were much more pragmatic. And I think he does do subtle little things that sort of get missed, and a lot of it is a lot of nonsense that's spouted. But yeah, good signing, another body, and hopefully when we get a few bodies back and you get the team actually sort of the squad fully fit. Well, if that day ever comes, then we can really judge judge Ange Postecoglou then, because at the moment he's got a bit of a get out, hasn't he? I say, but when he did have his sort of first choice in his first sort of period in charge, they were doing extremely well, and people say, "Oh, he got sussed out." I don't think that's necessarily the case. There is an element to that, but I think you have to constantly evolve anyway. So I think that's just normal, to be honest with you.
I just wonder, Paul, a lot of talk has been about this window, about the fact Ange hasn't been backed, and the common PR thing has been, we are backing Ange Postecoglou. Do you think the club will now turn around and say, we've backed you? Do you think that will be the thing they'll turn around and say, we've backed you? Do you think that will be the feeling the club would put back on Ange now? We've backed you. It's now down to you. We've given you a forward. We've given you a defender. I'm intrigued to know what you would imagine they would be thinking now if, like I say, that comes up again about being backed and whatever. As fans, I'll make it clear, I feel sorry for him. I think he's been massively, definitely throughout his tenure, in my opinion, been let down. I think in the summer window, look, whilst there were some great kids in there, no one can disagree, Bergvall and Gray, great kids for the future. I think what he could have done at that point was, as me and Jason spoke about many times, a little bit of experience around them. Give them the best chance to flourish with a little bit of experience. This window, look, they've got a defender in that, to be fair to him, has got Champions League experience. They've got Tel, that again, to be fair to him again, has been exposed to Europe. He's played for Bayern Munich, as Jason would say, one of the big glamour clubs out there. So you'd say there's been an element of they brought in slightly more experience. But again, Tel is still very much a raw product that they've got real high hopes for. But it comes back to that point, Paul, that I'd love to know what you think. Do you think Ange Postecoglou will feel now, right, I've been backed this window?
Well, the board will certainly feel they've backed him. That's guaranteed. Because they, on paper, they can turn around and go, well, you've been our manager for 18 months and you've spent £410 million. So in their eyes, they'll believe that they've backed him wholeheartedly. And I think in their eyes also, they can say, we've supported you through this poor run and through the injury crisis. So how can you sort of even feel that you haven't been backed by us? I think that'll be their point of view. I think Ange in private will probably be slightly disappointed, but purely because on a numbers basis, I think he'll feel that he's short, particularly if he's privy to sort of more information on the health of the squad. But I think every manager will always say they're short in private. Whether they say it publicly is another matter. But in terms of the actual numbers on a balance sheet, then ENIC will turn around and say that you've been backed, so you've got no excuses. But as we know, there's mitigating factors with the injuries. So yeah, I think that he will also come out and say that they've backed him. I think there'll be quite a universal sort of front, because privately, I think he probably does feel actually that I could have been in another club and another job and they would have sacked me. So yeah, I think privately he probably feels that he could have done with a couple more, but I do believe that he'll feel that he could have done with more. But I think the club will definitely say that they've been and backed him.
Okay, interesting. Look, we're looking for a close on this show very, very soon. Jason, just to come over to you on this point. Look, we keep referring to the fact that the manager has needed more options, he's needed more flexibility, he's needed more freshness. You've said it yourself now. You think that these two players that they've brought in over the course of the next few days, this is going to enable them to have a little bit more freshness. I mean, it is hard at the moment because, again, we've got this situation around Van der Ven, as we've touched upon, Romero not being fully there. Again, where you'd argue we've probably got the most competition now is the goalkeepers in Kinski and Vicario. I'm really interested to see the way that plays out, because I think you've got two keepers there. I think Vicario is going to give his everything. I think Kinski will be the same way, he'll give his everything as well. I'm really intrigued to see how that battle is going to play out. Do you think, Jason, now looking at it, competition for places, will this, pardon the pun, spur on when he gets back the like of Brennan Johnson? Will it give Timo Werner a case? Maybe I'm using the wrong kind of player, Timo Werner, to case to spur him on. Do you feel with those two players coming in, that is going to hopefully just give everybody that little bit more impetus, that got to work harder, got to be fresher because there's players that are coming in now that are going to want to play games. I'm telling you, there's no way, I'm sure Paul will agree here, Tel has not come here to sit on the Tottenham bench. He's come here to prove in his next 6 months why he's going to be a player for the future and why Tottenham got that buy option there because they want to trigger it, right, Jace?
Absolutely, and I hope he shows that in training as well. I hope he does bring not an over-bloated ego with him, but I hope he does bring an ego from an elite club.
From a source that I was passed on, I was told that Tel is a really good player in terms of behind the scenes, a good egg. That someone he will get, get his head down. He'll work hard. He'll train. He only wants the best for his career. And I think what says it always that he had aspirations, Jace, of being a Bayern Munich legend. To believe that. I mean, listen, we're not stupid. We know Tottenham are a big club, but Bayern Munich are an absolutely huge football club. So to believe you're going to be a legend at that football club, you must have great self-belief, right, Jace?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been around quality players. I mean, Sane, Gnabry, Musiala's, Kane's, Thomas Muller's, players like that. I mean, you're talking serious players. So, absolutely. I mean, I think there is one eye on Sonny's succession. And Brennan Johnson needs to up his game because he can play either side. And, somebody like Werner knows that he'll barely probably get a game now. And hopefully even a Wilson Odobert has got to think, there's serious competition there. And even if he goes down the middle, Solanke's got to, or Richarlison's got to realise I've got to deliver numbers. So absolutely, that's what you want. I think it's that deal is only a positive for Tottenham. And if he comes and does well, and scores the goals and gets the assists and shows that ability that we all know, it can't go wrong, can it, for us? But no. Let's just hope he stays fit for the rest of the season.
I totally agree. Look, I want to close it on this point. Paul, we've been blessed to have you on here before the window's open. Now it's closed. Paul, what do you think we'll do between now and the end of the season in terms of domestically and cup-wise? Can you see Spurs now somehow in what's been a basket case of a season going on to maybe win something and Tel suddenly becoming a player that was talked about so much that goes and wins a bloody trophy? But what do you think can happen if you were to try and... I can't ask you to predict Tottenham because not even you, Fletcher, can predict Tottenham. What can you see happening in these next few weeks to the end of the season? Or it takes more than a few weeks. Obviously, we've got a second half of the season still to play.
Well, the only consistency with Tottenham is the inconsistency, isn't it? So, it's hard to sort of nail your colours to the mast and say, we wouldn't. Not many people would have said we'd lose sort of 6-7 games in a row, and vice versa. They'd say we aren't capable of winning 6 or 7 in a row. But those things are possible in football, aren't they? So, and particularly at Tottenham, it's a basket case club. It's it's so hard to predict. But I said all along from the beginning of the season that I expect them to land anywhere between sort of 7th and 8th. I would rejig that slightly now to drop a little bit lower than that, but maybe sort of top 10, 10th, something like that. Purely because of the injuries. I mean, we all expected at the beginning of the season to have sort of not the sort of catastrophic amounts of injuries that we've had. So we have to take that into account, and that has to sort of reduce our expectations in that sense of where we finish. But I think 7th or 8th was par for this squad, to be honest, with what they built in the summer. The cups, we all love a cup, obviously, and the one year where we're doing well in it. Obviously, the 4 semi-finalists. I don't think there's ever been a year where the 4 semi-finalists are as strong as they are, to be honest, in the Carabao. And the FA Cup, well, who knows? But fingers crossed for Sunday and Villa Park.
Can we ask you for a prediction, Paul, of the next couple of games? Do you dare give us a prediction?
I fear for us at Liverpool. I just want us to show up and have a go. And not have a go as in be reckless, but show a real sort of, determination to sort of win every ball and every second tackle and stuff like that. Not be wide open and reckless, but I still want us to go up there and with the intent, because if you could nick a 1-0 lead, all of a sudden that does change the atmosphere, and it does change the sort of dynamics. Then they need a couple, and they need 3 to beat you, sort of. So, and then you can counter, obviously, as well. So I think the start, I would be saying to the lads, please, the first 20 minutes, you've got to dig in like you're in the trenches, and you've got to try and just hold out, because there will be a wave at first, won't there? Of course.
Yeah.
So if we concede after 5 minutes, then you fear for them. But if you can sort of just nick through that 20, get to half time, who knows? But yeah, you'd expect. Let's be honest, you'd expect Liverpool to win that fixture. The Villa game is a bit more even. We haven't got a disastrous record there, have we? And we have had a habit. We have had a habit of turning up places sort of unexpectedly and rolling teams over. So you just don't know with that one.
6 of the last 10, Paul, we've won 4-0.
Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. So I wouldn't sort of be overly confident, but I would think, it depends. I mean, Thursday, if they went through Thursday, imagine the high they're going to be on going into Sunday. So.
I agree.
And vice versa. So one could lead to the other, So it's hard to say, but hopefully we do ourselves justice. Man.
Yeah. I think that's all you can ask for, isn't it? As long as they go out there and give it 100%. I think that's the thing about cup games in the past. But I don't mean disrespect. I mean, look, you remember some of the cup exits we've had, Sheffield United, Colchester. As long as we go out there and
just limp. Just
go out there. As long as we go out there, as long as we go out there and give everything, then that's all you can ask for. And I want to believe, based on what I saw against Brentford and the way those players, I think, really took it upon themselves to fight for the manager and actually fight for themselves. I think it was a real good feeling there with regards to trying to come together. I really want to see that spirit for these next couple of games, because again, we're not stupid, we're not again foolish. We are aware, look, it's one win in the last 12 and 13 in the league. Look, we're not suggesting there isn't problems there, but look, at the end of the day, they've got a couple of players in. We now have to see if this is going to make an impact for the next part of the season. Paul, I want to say a massive thank you. There's been nearly over 40,000 that have watched this show. Ridiculous, really, quite ridiculous. It's been unbelievable. Paul, if I redirect them to your X account, it will blow up, and you probably need to go back into hiding now for a good period, right?
They're already You don't need to promote it. You're fine.
But I'm sure you also will want to say a massive thank you. There's a lot of Tottenham fans out there that do hang on a lot of your words. I'm sure you're aware of the lot of support you've got out there, right?
Yeah, the majority, overwhelming majority, are really, really good people.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want Tottenham to do well.
Yeah.
And we express it in different ways, and we all get wound up, and we all say things, and it's easier to write something down than you would say to someone in the pub. So and that's part of the game, isn't it? It's part. And at the end of the day, you can tailor and you can restrict your audience to whatever you want it to be. So. Yeah, we're all grown adults. We have to get on with it.
We are. No, Jace, I think you found it a lot easier since coming off X, right? You're enjoying a lot more life away from it. Yeah.
The amount of toxicity that's gone out of my mind and that, it's brilliant. Absolutely, I'd recommend it to anyone. Get off the platform.
Don't recommend it to Paul, because we need to keep Paul on the platform. Apart from Paul, keep Paul on there.
But I mean, Paul's so famous, he just gets called by his initials. So you look at the comments, nobody calls him Mickey. It's VDV. And all I see is POK. It's perfect. We all know, as soon as I see POK, I know who they're talking about.
A collective groan.
Well, it's really just coming from here. Again. Listen, I tell you, just on that point, we're going to finish where we are with Tel. There's some more news to come on Tel, just when we look to close this show very, very quickly. We understand there is an agreement in place between Tottenham and Tel directly that the option to buy will only be triggered if the player also gives his consent. So really important that we put that out there from that perspective, that again, it's down to the player as well as Tottenham to find that agreement. And let's hope, Paul, as we've said, it's a real positive second half of the season, right?
Yeah, it sounds like they've basically said to the boy, look, if you come here and perform, we'll give you the platform and the opportunity. Come and see what you think of us. We'll see what we think of you. And if I think Spurs have got sort of five months to sort of convince him that's the place where his future lies.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, isn't it? It's 5 months now. Let's see what they can convince, because at the end of the day, if you want to be bringing, Jason, as you said, these kind of caliber of players that you wouldn't get on day one of the window, if you're going to want those players, Jace, you've got to show them why they want to be here for 6 years, right, Jace?
Absolutely, and don't even fear that that option kind of leaves it open for him to be snapped up by somebody else, because the likelihood is someone will snap him up if he comes here and scores goals and plays well. If he puts on, how many league games we've got left? 15, 14, 15, isn't it? So he performs in 10 of those and comes out with 12 goals or something, then and gets some assists. Of course, people are going to want him, but then Tottenham have had that benefit from it as well, haven't they? And then haven't had to commit the money. So don't look at just his option and the option as a bad thing and say, oh no, it should have been an obligation. Use the option to our benefit as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, listen, we're going to say a massive thank you to the wonderful Jason McGovern. Jason's closing the transfer window on last one on Spurs. You heard it here first. He wouldn't do it for anybody else but you, Paul, just so you know. There's no way he'd do it for me. It's only for Paul.
It was either Paul or Bridgie. They're the only two I'd come on for. Certainly wasn't going to be for Darmesh.
Leave Darvish alone. Leave him alone. Listen, the wonderful Paul O Keefe. So much love for Paul. Well, there you go. Paul, we're going to see you hopefully. Where are we now? We're going to see you towards the summer where hopefully, please God, by then.
I'll give him a rest for 4 months. Let him rest.
We've
Paul,
got to
come on holiday. Come to Thailand with me, mate. Come and have holiday.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Get on the beach.
Not where he's going. Not where he's going. You don't want to go to the place he's going, Paul. You won't get out. They won't let you back in if he goes where he's going to go. Listen, I want to say a massive thank you again to this wonderful watching audience. There you go. Tottenham have delivered. It's been late. It has been arguably great. Tel is Tottenham. It is a done deal. Tottenham have got their man, Mathys Tel, on the final day of this January transfer window. Over 40,000 of you have listened, watched Last Word on Spurs. I want to say a massive thank you to every single contributor that has helped us through this January transfer window. There's been so many. I've got to just quickly name off if I don't mind very quickly. These guys got to go to bed. George Achillia, Johnny H, Asthmatic, Anthony Costa was even on here. TJ Ramini was on here. David the Irish Hotspur was here. Billy T was here. Patrick Tyrant was here. And we closed with Jason McGovern. We closed with Russ Williams. And we closed with the GOAT of what many out there say is the Tottenham Hotspur fan base, the wonderful Paul O Keefe. Tottenham, we've got our man. Let's hope for a positive next 4 or 5 months in store from myself, from the brilliant Jason McGovern, from the man who is the legend that we love very much, Paul O Keefe. We have been the Last Word on Spurs. Please keep safe, keep well, hit subscribe and like on the way out. And as always,